What would you do if you found someone begging you to end their life? Tonight's story will test the very meaning of mercy, freedom, and the cost of doing what's right when the whole world wants you to do wrong. This is a tale of fire, blood, and two souls who refuse to break. Stay with me until the end. You won't believe how this journey ends. And when you're done, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels across the world. The sun bled across the western horizon like a wounded animal, painting the Texas scrubland in shades of copper and ash. Caleb Rourke stood at the edge of his property, one boot propped against the lowest rail of his fence, watching the day die the way it always did out here. Violent, beautiful, and utterly indifferent to anything human. He'd been working this land for 7 years now, carving out an existence from dirt that fought him every season, from cattle that seemed determined to wander into every conceivable danger, and from a loneliness so deep it had stopped feeling like loneliness at all. It had become just another part of the landscape, like the mesquite and the rattlesnakes. The fence line stretched out before him, a testament to months of backbreaking labor, posts driven into ground that resisted every blow. Wires strung tight enough to sing in the wind, but loose enough to give when the cattle leaned. It wasn't much, but it was his. That's when he saw it. At first, his mind refused to process what his eyes were telling him. About 200 yards down the fence, something was wrong. The shape didn't belong. It wasn't a coyote carcass or a tumbleweed caught in the wire. It was too large, too dark, too deliberately placed. Caleb's hand moved instinctively to the rifle slung across his back. Out here, strange meant dangerous. Always had, always would. He approached slowly, boots crunching through the dried grass, every sense heightened. The evening wind carried no sound except its own whisper through the mesquite. No birds, no insects. Just silence, which was somehow worse than any scream. As he got closer, the shape resolved into something that made his stomach turn to ice. A woman. She was chained to his fence post, her body slumped forward in a position that suggested she'd been there for more than a day. Maybe longer. Her clothes were torn, stained with dried blood and dirt. Dark hair hung in matted tangles around her face. Her wrists were raw and bleeding where the iron cuffs bit into flesh. Caleb's first instinct was to look around, scanning the horizon for whoever had done this. The scrubland stretched empty in all directions, offering no answers. Just the dying light, and the wind, and this woman who shouldn't be here. He approached within 10 feet and stopped. Her head was down, her breathing shallow. She might have been unconscious or dead, or somewhere in between. "Ma'am?" His voice came out rough from disuse. He didn't talk much these days, even to himself. No response. He moved closer, rifle still ready, until he stood directly in front of her. Up close, he could see she'd been beaten. Badly. One eye was swollen shut, her lips split, bruises blooming across her visible skin in violent shades of purple and yellow. Whoever had done this had taken their time. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" This time, her head moved, just barely. A slight lift of her chin that took obvious effort. When her eyes opened, one brown eye really, since the other couldn't, Caleb saw something that stopped him cold. Not fear, not pain, not desperation, pure burning defiance. "Kill me," she whispered. Her voice was a ruined rasp, barely audible. "Please, just kill me. Make it quick." Caleb had seen a lot of things in his 34 years. He'd fought in a war that nobody remembered anymore, watched men die in ways that still visited him in dreams, and he'd learned that the world was full of cruelty that served no purpose beyond its own perpetuation. But he'd never heard someone beg for death with eyes that refused to surrender. "Who did this to you?" he asked. She let out a sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been so broken. "Does it matter? It does to me." Her working eyes studied him with an intensity that felt like being measured, weighed, judged. "Then you're a fool," she said. "Anyone who helps me, they'll come for you too." "They? Doesn't matter. Won't matter. You should just—" She coughed, and blood flecked her lips. "Just do it. One shot. Clean. That's mercy enough." Caleb looked at the chains. Heavy iron, the kind you'd use for restraining livestock. Or prisoners. The padlock was good quality, expensive. Whoever had secured her here had resources. He could walk away. Should walk away. This wasn't his problem. Whatever war she was caught in, whatever sins had led her to this fence, they had nothing to do with him. But he'd walked away from things before, and those choices had a way of following a man, sitting beside him at the dinner table, standing in the corner of his vision, whispering in the dark hours before dawn. "I'm not going to kill you," he said. "Then you're sentencing us both." "Maybe." He unslung his rifle and set it against the fence post, then pulled a small toolkit from his belt. The lock was tough, but he'd worked with worse. "But I reckon that's a choice I can live with." "You don't understand?" "No, I don't. But I understand this. No woman deserves to die chained to a fence like a dog." He worked the lock pick with practiced patience. The war had taught him many skills. Breaking locks was one of the more useful ones. She watched him work, that single eye never leaving his face. "They'll kill you for this." "Folks have been trying to kill me for one reason or another most of my life, still here." "These aren't folks. These are—" She coughed again, harder this time. Her whole body shook with it. The lock gave way with a satisfying click. Caleb caught her as she fell forward, the sudden release of the chains taking away the only thing holding her upright. She weighed almost nothing, all sharp angles and wasted muscle under torn clothing. "Easy now," he said, lowering her to the ground. "I've got you." "You don't got anything," she muttered, but there was less fight in her voice now. "You just bought yourself a death sentence." "Well, it won't be my first." He gathered her up carefully, mindful of injuries he couldn't see. "My cabin's about a quarter mile that way. Can you hold on?" "Do I have a choice?" "Everyone's got a choice. That's the thing they don't tell you. We always have a choice, right up until we don't." She made that broken laugh sound again. "Philosopher rancher. That's a new one." "I have layers. You have a death wish." Caleb started walking, the woman's weight barely noticeable compared to the feed sacks he hauled daily. The sun had nearly set now, turning the sky into a bruise of purples and reds. Stars were beginning to emerge, cold and distant. "What's your name?" he asked. Silence for a long moment. Then, "Ayla. Ayla Vance." "Caleb Rourke." "Well, Caleb Rourke, I hope you made peace with whatever God you believe in, because you just made an enemy of something far worse." He didn't respond to that, partly because he didn't know what to say, and partly because he was focused on the horizon, where the last light was fading. If someone was watching, they'd have seen him take her, which meant the clock was already ticking. The cabin came into view as full darkness settled over the land. It wasn't much, a single-room structure he'd built himself from timber hauled from 30 miles away, with a stone chimney and a roof that only leaked in 2 places. But it was solid, defensible, and most importantly, it was his. He kicked the door open and carried Ayla inside, laying her on his bed, the only bed, which meant he'd be sleeping on the floor for the foreseeable future. She was shivering now, shock setting in. He lit the oil lamp on the table, filling the room with weak yellow light that threw dancing shadows on the walls. For the first time, he could see the full extent of her injuries. It was worse than he'd thought. "I need to clean these wounds," he said, moving to the basin where he kept his washing water. "It's going to hurt." "Everything hurts. What's a little more?" He heated water on the stove, tore strips from a clean shirt, and gathered what medical supplies he had, which wasn't much. Some whiskey for cleaning, some laudanum for pain, needle and thread for the worst cuts. When he returned to the bedside, she was watching him again with that same measuring look. "Why?" she asked. "Why what?" "Why help me?" "You don't know me. Don't know what I've done. Don't know what's coming for you now." Caleb dipped a cloth in the warm water and began cleaning the blood from her face, working gently around the swollen eye. "Does there need to be a why?" "In my experience, always." "Then maybe I'm tired of the world being the way it is. Maybe I saw a chance to make one thing right, and I took it. That's naive. Probably." He moved to her wrists, carefully washing away the dried blood. The skin beneath was raw, infected in places. She'd struggled against those chains for a long time. "But I've tried being cynical, didn't much care for it." She hissed as the cloth touched an open wound, but she didn't pull away. "You keep talking like you have a choice in what happens next." "We always have a choice, even if it's just how we face what's coming." Philosophy again. I read a lot, not much else to do out here. He worked in silence for a while, cleaning, disinfecting, bandaging. She bore it all without complaint, though he could see the pain in the way her jaw clenched, the way her good hand gripped the blanket. "You were a soldier," she said finally. It wasn't a question. "How'd you know?" "The way you carry yourself, the way you check the perimeter before entering your own home. The way you're treating these wounds. You've done field medicine before." "I was a lot of things. Most of them I'd rather forget." "Join the club." He finished with her visible injuries and sat back. "I need to check your ribs. You might have breaks." She nodded, and he helped her sit up, removing what was left of her shirt with clinical detachment. More bruises, more cuts, and yes, at least 2 ribs that felt wrong when he gently probed them. "Cracked, not broken," he said. "I'll wrap them. But you need to stay still for a while. Let them heal." "I don't have a while. Neither do you." "How long before they come?" She met his eyes. "They're probably already watching, waiting to see what you'll do. If you'll keep me, kill me, or try to run." "And what happens when they decide they've waited long enough?" "They'll come, and they won't ask nicely." Caleb finished wrapping her ribs and helped her lie back down. "Who are they?" "You really want to know? Or would you rather maintain plausible deniability for another few hours?" "I'd rather know what I'm up against." Ayla closed her good eye for a long moment. When she opened it again, there was something new in her expression. Not quite trust, but maybe the beginning of it. "You ever hear of the Vance family?" "Can't say I have." "Good. That means you're either very isolated or very lucky. The Vance family controls most of the territory from here to the Guadalupe Mountains. Cattle, horses, land, water rights. If it's worth having, they own it or they're trying to. Let me guess, you're related." "A daughter of Marcus Vance, his only legitimate child, for whatever that's worth." She laughed bitterly. "I was supposed to marry into another powerful family, cement alliances, produce heirs, all the things good daughters do. What happened?" "I said no." The simplicity of it hung in the air between them. "You said no," Caleb repeated. "I said no. To the marriage, to the alliance, to being treated like property to be traded. And my father," she touched her swollen face gingerly, "he doesn't take no well. Neither does the family I was supposed to marry into." "So they did this? Your own family?" "My father's men did the beating. The Carver family, that's who I was promised to. They ordered me chained to your fence. A message, to me, to my father, to anyone who might think about crossing them." "What kind of message?" "That I'm worthless now, ruined, that I chose wrong, and this is the consequence." Caleb felt something cold settle in his chest. He'd seen evil in the war, men who killed for sport, who tortured for pleasure. But there was something especially dark about this kind of calculated cruelty. "How long were you out there?" 3 days, maybe 4. I lost track." "And they just left you?" "They brought water once, enough to keep me alive, not enough to give me strength. I think they wanted me to suffer as long as possible before I died." "Why my fence?" She shrugged and immediately regretted it, pain flashing across her face. "Remote, unlikely to be found quickly, and when someone did find me, it would be a warning to them too. This is what happens when you cross the Vances or the Carvers. Stay out of it." "Well," Caleb said, moving to the stove to heat up some broth, "I never was good at following warnings." "You're insane." "Possibly, but you're alive and that counts for something." He poured the broth into a tin cup and brought it to her. "Drink this, slow. You haven't eaten in days, your stomach won't handle much." She took the cup with shaking hands and sipped carefully. "You still don't understand what you've done." "Then explain it to me." "By freeing me, you've made yourself part of this. You've taken a side whether you meant to or not. The Carvers will see it as an insult. My father will see it as interference, and both of them—" She took another sip. "Both of them have the resources and the ruthlessness to make you disappear. Let them try." "You say that now, but you haven't met them, haven't seen what they're capable of." Caleb pulled a chair over and sat beside the bed. "I've seen plenty, and I've learned that running from bad men just means they catch you from behind. Better to face them head on. That's not courage, that's suicide." "Maybe, but it's my suicide to commit. She studied him again, that intensity returning to her gaze. You're serious. You actually intend to fight them. If it comes to that, it will come to that. The only question is when. Then I'll be ready when it does. Ayla shook her head slowly. You're either the bravest man I've ever met, or the stupidest. Can it be both? Despite everything, the pain, the fear, the hopelessness, she smiled. Just a little, just for a second. But it was there. I don't understand you, Caleb Rourke. That makes two of us. He stood and moved to the window, looking out into the darkness. Get some rest. We'll figure out the next step in the morning. There is no next step. There's only waiting for them to come. Then we'll wait together. He heard her shift on the bed, settling in. You should give me a weapon. That caught his attention. He turned from the window. Why? Because when they come, I won't go back alive, and I won't let them take me without a fight. Her voice was steady, certain. I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees. Caleb walked to the gun cabinet in the corner and pulled out a revolver. He checked it was loaded, then brought it to her. You know how to use this? My father made sure I knew how to shoot before he made sure I knew how to read. Said a woman who could defend herself was worth more than one who couldn't. Ironic, isn't it? He placed the gun on the table beside the bed, within her reach. Don't shoot me by accident. I don't do anything by accident. Caleb returned to the window, his own rifle now in hand. The night was deep and quiet, but he could feel eyes on his cabin. Maybe imagination, maybe instinct. Either way, he wasn't going to sleep tonight. Caleb? Yeah? Thank you for the mercy, even if it kills us both. You're welcome. Hours passed in silence. Ayla's breathing eventually evened out into something resembling sleep, though he suspected it was more exhaustion than rest. Caleb kept his vigil at the window, watching the darkness for movement that never came. But it would come. She was right about that. He'd made his choice when he broke those chains, and now he'd live with the consequences. Or die with them. Either way, he was done walking away. As the first hint of dawn began to gray the eastern sky, Caleb heard Ayla stir behind him. You didn't sleep, she said. Someone needed to keep watch. They won't come in daylight. They'll wait for another night. Let your guard drop. Let you think maybe you're safe after all. You know them well. I should. I spent 22 years learning how they think. She sat up slowly, moving like every bone hurt. My father is methodical. The Carvers are patient. They'll want to make an example of you, which means they'll take their time. Make it public. Make it hurt. Cheerful morning thoughts. I'm just trying to prepare you for what's coming. Caleb set his rifle against the wall and moved to the stove, stirring up the fire to heat water for coffee. What do you want to do? What do you mean? You. What do you want? Because right now you've got a choice. You can stay here, help me defend this place when they come. Or I can give you a horse, supplies, and you can ride. Put as much distance between yourself and this mess as possible. Ayla laughed, sharp and bitter. Run? Where exactly would I run to? My father controls everything for 300 miles in every direction. The Carvers have reach even beyond that. There's nowhere I could go that they wouldn't find me eventually. Then maybe it's time to stop running. And do what? Fight an entire empire with one rancher and his rifle? I've seen worse odds. You're insane. You mentioned that already. The coffee boiled, and Caleb poured 2 cups. He brought one to Ayla, who accepted it with both hands, letting the warmth seep into her palms. You really think we have a chance? She asked quietly. I think chances are what we make of them. And I think you didn't survive 3 days chained to a fence just to give up now. I survived because I was too stubborn to die. That's not the same as having hope. Hope's overrated anyway. I prefer spite. She almost smiled again. Spite I can work with. They drank their coffee in comfortable silence as the sun climbed higher, painting the scrubland in shades of gold and amber. It would have been beautiful if it wasn't such dangerous country. I need to see the perimeter, Caleb said finally. Check for signs of anyone watching. You up for a walk? My ribs say no, but my pride says yes. Listen to your ribs. I stopped listening to my body's better judgment around the time I told Marcus Vance to go to hell. She stood, steadying herself against the bed frame. I'll be fine. She wasn't fine. She could barely walk, but Caleb recognized the stubborn set of her jaw. She was going to do this whether he approved or not. He offered his arm, which she took after a moment's hesitation, and together they walked out into the morning light. The ranch was modest, 200 acres of scrubland that Caleb had been slowly improving, acre by acre. A small corral held 3 horses. A shed contained tools and supplies. The rest was just land, stretching out to meet the sky. It's peaceful, Ayla said. Or it was. It'll be peaceful again, once this is over. You really believe that? I have to. They walked the fence line slowly, Caleb's eyes scanning for anything out of place. Tracks, broken branches, signs of passage. For the first hour, they found nothing. Then Ayla stopped, her hand tightening on his arm. There, she said, pointing to a ridge about 500 yards north. See that glint? Caleb squinted against the sun. She was right. There was something metallic catching the light. A rifle scope, maybe, or binoculars. They're watching, Ayla confirmed. Probably have been all night. How many do you think? At least 3. Probably more. They'll want overwhelming force when they finally move. When do you think that'll be? Tonight. Maybe tomorrow night. They'll want you tired, paranoid, want you to make mistakes. Caleb guided her back toward the cabin, keeping his movements casual. No point in letting them know he'd spotted their position. We need to prepare, he said once they were inside. Fortify what we can. Set up lines of sight. Create choke points. You're talking about a siege. I'm talking about survival. Ayla sank into the chair by the table, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Caleb, I need you to understand something. These men, they won't just kill us. They'll make it last, make it hurt, make it a story that gets told for years. Then we'll make sure our version is the one that gets told. How? By winning. She laughed, but there was something different in it now, not just bitterness, maybe the faintest edge of hope, despite what she'd said earlier. You're either going to get us both killed, she said, or you're going to do something amazing. I can't tell which. Let's find out together. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Caleb moved ammunition into strategic locations around the cabin. Ayla, despite her injuries, helped him barricade windows and reinforce the door. They worked in focused silence, both knowing that this was likely futile but unable to stop trying. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Caleb made a stew from salt pork and vegetables. They ate together at the small table, a strange domesticity settling over the scene. Tell me about yourself, Ayla said suddenly. If we're going to die together, I should know who you are. Not much to tell. I grew up on a farm in Missouri, joined the army when I was 18 because it seemed like an adventure, fought in a war that nobody won, came home and found I didn't fit anymore. So I drifted west until I found this place. And you've been alone out here for 7 years? Mostly. Get into town, maybe once a month for supplies. Otherwise, it's just me and the land. Sounds lonely. It is. But it's honest. The land doesn't lie to you, doesn't pretend to be something it's not. Unlike people. Unlike people. Ayla pushed food around her plate. I was supposed to have a different life, big house, fancy dresses, society parties. All the things a rancher's daughter dreams about. But I went riding one day when I was 16, rode out past the fence lines, out where women weren't supposed to go, and I felt something I'd never felt before. Freedom. Real freedom. Not the kind they talk about in parlors while serving tea. The kind where the only rules are the ones nature sets. And you wanted more of it. I wanted all of it. Wanted to live on my terms, make my own choices, be my own person. But that's not how the world works for women like me. We're property. Valuable property, sure, but property nonetheless. Is that why you refused the marriage? Partly. Also because John Carver is a cruel, petty man who gets pleasure from hurting things weaker than him. I saw how he treated his horses, his dogs, his workers. I knew what marriage to him would mean. So you chose this instead. I chose nothing. This was chosen for me. All I did was refuse to cooperate. That's the same thing as choosing. She met his eyes across the table. Is it? In my experience, yes. Not choosing is still a choice. You could have gone along, married the cruel man, lived in the big house, But you chose to say no, even knowing what it would cost you. And what did it cost me? Everything. My family, my home, my future, nearly my life. But not your soul. That's still yours. Ayla was quiet for a long moment. You're a strange man, Caleb Rourke. So I've been told. They finished eating as darkness claimed the land. Caleb extinguished the lamp, plunging the cabin into shadow. They sat in the darkness, waiting, listening. An hour passed. 2. 3. Then, so faint it might have been imagination, the sound of horses. Multiple horses. Moving slowly, carefully. They're coming, Ayla whispered. Caleb moved to the window, peering through a crack in the boards. He counted 6 riders, maybe more in the darkness. They stopped about 100 yards out, just beyond rifle range. Caleb Rourke! A voice called across the distance. Deep, authoritative, used to being obeyed. We know you're in there. We know you have the woman. Caleb didn't respond. You've made a grave mistake, Rourke. That woman is claimed property. You have no right to her. Beside him, Ayla tensed. That's Jacob Carver, John's father. Send her out now and we'll make this quick for you. You have my word. The word of a man who chains women to fences, Caleb muttered. I'll pass. He called back. She's not property, and she's not going anywhere. Silence. Then laughter rolled across the darkness, cold and cruel. Then you've chosen death, Rourke. We'll give you until dawn to reconsider. After that, we'll come in there and take what's ours. And when we're done with you, there won't be enough left to bury. The riders wheeled their horses and disappeared back into the night. They're not bluffing, Ayla said. They'll come at dawn. Maybe 50 men. Maybe more. They'll burn this place to the ground with us inside. Caleb checked his rifle. Then we'd better make sure they pay for it. This is insane, you know that, right? We can't win. Probably not. But we can make them remember us. She grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Caleb, listen to me. You can still walk away. Tell them I overpowered you, took your horse. They might believe it. They might let you live. No. Why not? Why die for someone you don't even know? He turned to face her fully. Because if I walk away from this, I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I left someone to die. And I've lived with enough ghosts already. I don't need another one. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're brave. I know you chose freedom over safety. I know you'd rather die fighting than live as someone's property. That's all I need to know. Tears gathered in her good eye, though she blinked them back. You're going to get yourself killed. We're all going to die eventually. At least this way it means something. They stood there in the darkness, 2 people who'd met just a day ago, but who now faced death together. The absurdity of it wasn't lost on Caleb, but he'd stopped questioning the strange turns his life took years ago. What do we do until dawn? Ayla asked. We rest. We prepare. We make peace with whatever comes next. I don't know how to make peace with this. Neither do I, but we've got until sunrise to figure it out. They settled into positions, Caleb by the window with his rifle, Ayla at the door with the revolver. Outside, the night pressed close, full of unseen watchers and promised violence. Hours crawled by. Caleb found himself thinking about the choices that had led him here. The war, the drifting, the decision to build a life in this harsh, unforgiving land. Had any of it mattered? Had any of it meant anything? Maybe not. Or maybe this was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was supposed to do. There was a certain poetry in dying to protect someone's freedom. His father would have approved, at least. Caleb? Ayla's voice was soft in the darkness. Yeah? Thank you. For giving me one more day of freedom. For not treating me like property. For... She paused. For seeing me as human. You don't need to thank me for basic decency. In my world, basic decency is rare enough to warrant thanks. Then your world needs to change. Maybe it will. After tonight, one way or another, it'll change. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten when they heard it, the sound of many horses. Not trying to hide now, not being careful, just coming, certain in their numbers and their strength. Caleb counted at least 30 riders, maybe more. They spread out in a semicircle around the cabin, just beyond rifle range. Waiting. The same voice from before, Jacob Carver, called out again. Last chance, Rourke. Send out the woman and we'll make it quick. Keep her, and you both burn. Caleb looked at Ayla. She looked back. No words needed. He called back, Come and take her. The response was immediate. Riders surged forward, some carrying torches, others with rifles raised. They were going to burn them out and shoot them as they ran. Caleb fired. His first shot took a rider from his saddle. Ayla fired from the door and another man went down. But there were too many, far too many. Arrows began slamming into the cabin walls. They wanted the fire to spread slowly, wanted to savor this. This is it, Ayla said, her voice steady despite everything. We made them pay. That's something. It's everything. More shots, more arrows. Smoke began filling the cabin as the walls caught fire. They'd have to run soon. And when they did, they'd die. Caleb reloaded, resigned to making their last stand as costly as possible. That's when he heard it. New gunfire, coming from behind the attackers. And screaming. Not screams of attack, but screams of surprise and pain. The riders wheeled in confusion as new forces swept into them from three sides. Riders in different colors, fighting with coordinated precision. The Carver men scattered, caught between the cabin and this new threat. In minutes, it was over. The attackers were dead, captured, or fleeing. And approaching the cabin was a group of riders led by a woman on a magnificent black horse. She was older, weathered by sun and time, but she sat in her saddle with absolute authority. You can come out, she called. The fighting's done. Caleb and Ayla emerged cautiously from the smoking cabin. The woman dismounted and approached, her eyes fixed on Ayla. Child, she said, and her voice cracked with emotion. We've been searching for you for days. Ayla stared. Aunt Clara? Your father's sister, and the leader of those who still believe the Vance family should stand for something more than cruelty and greed. I don't understand. Clara gestured to the riders behind her. Your father's rule is not as absolute as he thinks. Many of us have been waiting for the right moment to challenge him. When we heard what he'd done to you, his own daughter, that was the moment we needed. She turned to Caleb. And you must be the man foolish enough to free her. Guilty. Then you're either very brave or very stupid. Can it be both? Clara laughed. I like him already. Ayla, you have a choice to make. Come with us. We're going to confront your father, demand changes, real changes. Or, she gestured to Caleb, or walk a different path entirely. Ayla looked at Caleb, then at her aunt, then back at Caleb. The rising sun painted everything in shades of gold and red, a new day breaking over the bloodied ground. And in that moment, between two futures, between two lives, she stood at the crossroads that would define everything to come. The silence that followed Clara's words hung heavy in the morning air, thick with smoke and possibility. Ayla stood between her past and her future, between the blood she was born into and the choice she'd fought for. The burned cabin smoldered behind them, a testament to how close they'd come to losing everything. How did you find us? Ayla asked finally, her voice hoarse from smoke and exhaustion. Clara's weathered face softened. I've had people watching your father's movements for months. When we heard what he'd done, when we learned he'd ordered his own daughter beaten and chained like an animal, it confirmed everything we'd suspected about how far he'd fallen. She gestured to the riders spread out across Caleb's property. These are loyal Vance family members, the ones who remember what our name used to stand for before Marcus turned it into an empire of fear. How many? Ayla's tactical mind was already working, even as she swayed on her feet. 43 here, another 100 scattered across the territory waiting for word. Clara moved closer, reaching out to touch Ayla's bruised face with gentle fingers. Child, what he did to you. There's no coming back from that. Not for him. Not anymore. Caleb watched the exchange in silence, his rifle still held ready. The Carver men lay scattered across his land, some dead, most wounded and restrained by Clara's forces. It should have felt like victory, but all he felt was a bone-deep weariness and a growing certainty that this was far from over. Mr. Rourke, Clara said, turning her attention to him, you've made yourself part of something much larger than a simple rescue. The moment you cut those chains, you became a symbol, a man who chose right over expedient. That makes you valuable. and dangerous. I don't want to be a symbol. I just want to be left alone. Too late for that. She gestured to the carnage around them. Word of this will spread. By nightfall, everyone within 300 miles will know that Caleb Rourke stood against the Carvers and survived. That will inspire some people, terrify others, and make you a target for anyone who sees change as a threat. Wonderful. Ayla touched his arm. She's right. Your life here, the quiet, the isolation, that's over now. They'll keep coming until you're dead or gone. Then I'll deal with them as they come. You can't fight an empire alone, Clara interjected. But you don't have to. Stand with us. Help us reshape what the Vance family means. Help us build something better from the ashes of what Marcus has created. Caleb looked at the burned cabin, at the bodies, at the blood soaking into his land. Everything he'd built over 7 years, destroyed in a single night. Part of him wanted to rage against it, to curse the cruelty of a world that couldn't leave one man in peace. But another part, the part that had cut those chains, knew this was inevitable. You couldn't stand for something without standing against something else. And he'd made his choice the moment he saw Ayla's defiant eyes. What exactly are you proposing? He asked. Clara smiled. A reckoning. Marcus Vance has ruled through fear and violence for too long. It's time the family held him accountable. But we need leverage. We need evidence of his crimes that even his allies can't ignore. And we need witnesses who can speak to what he's become. Ayla's testimony, Caleb said. Among others. But Ayla is the key. His own daughter, brutalized on his orders. That will shake even his most loyal supporters. Ayla shook her head, pain flashing across her face. You don't understand what you're asking. My father doesn't just have power, he has true believers. Men who would die for him without question. Going against him means civil war. Civil war is already here, Claire replied. It's been brewing for years. This just forces it into the open, where it can be settled once and for all. People will die. People are already dying. Your father's greed, the Carver's cruelty. How many have suffered under their rule? How many more will if nothing changes? The weight of that question settled over them all. Caleb watched Ayla wrestle with it, saw the pain and doubt and anger warring in her expression. She'd escaped one cage only to find herself at the center of something potentially much worse. I need time, Ayla said quietly. Time to heal, time to think. Time is a luxury we may not have, Clara warned. Marcus will hear about this attack within hours. He'll move to consolidate his power, eliminate anyone he sees as a threat. If we're going to act, it needs to be soon. Then act, but give me 24 hours. I've been beaten, starved, and nearly burned alive. I think I've earned a day to breathe. Clara studied her niece for a long moment, then nodded. 24 hours. But we can't leave you here. It's too exposed. Come to the ranch. It's fortified, defensible. You'll be safe there while you decide. I'm not leaving Caleb. The words came out fierce, protective. Clara raised an eyebrow. This man risked everything for you. The least we can do is ensure his safety too. She looked at Caleb. Your cabin is destroyed. Your land is a battlefield. You're welcome to come with us. Rest, recover, and decide if you want to be part of what comes next. Caleb wanted to refuse, wanted to stay on his land, rebuild, pretend none of this had happened. But the smoking ruins of his cabin told him that ship had sailed. All right, he said finally, but I'm not making any promises beyond getting through the next day. Fair enough. Clara's people moved with military efficiency, gathering weapons from the fallen Carvers, tending to their own wounded, and preparing to move out. Caleb salvaged what he could from the cabin. Some clothes, a few precious books, his father's pocket watch. Everything else was ash and memory. One of Clara's lieutenants, a grizzled man named Thomas, approached as Caleb finished loading supplies onto his horse. That was good shooting earlier, Thomas said. Military training? Some. We could use a man who keeps his head in a fight, if you decide to join us. I'll keep that in mind. Thomas nodded and moved off. Caleb caught Ayla watching him from where she sat on a horse Clara had provided. You don't have to do this, she called. You could ride in a different direction, disappear. Start over somewhere they'll never find you. He walked over, looking up at her. That's the second time you've suggested I run. You trying to get rid of me? I'm trying to give you an out. Before you're in so deep, there's no escape. I think we passed that point when I freed you. This is different. This is choosing to walk into a war. Isn't that what you're doing? She didn't have an answer for that. They rode north, 43 riders moving in tight formation across the scrubland. Clara kept scouts ahead and behind, watching for pursuit that never came. Either Marcus hadn't heard yet, or he was planning something more calculated than an immediate retaliation. Ayla rode beside Caleb, both of them silent for the first hour. Finally, she spoke. I keep thinking about what my life was supposed to be. The marriage, the big house, the children I was supposed to produce to strengthen the family line. She laughed bitterly. It seems like a dream now. Someone else's dream. Do you regret refusing? No, but I regret what it cost, what it's still costing. She looked at him. Your home, your peace, all because you helped me. My home was just wood and stone. I can rebuild that, but if I'd walked away from you, he shook his head, that would have cost something I couldn't rebuild. Your conscience, my humanity. There's a difference between surviving and living. I've spent 7 years surviving. Maybe it's time I tried living again. Living tends to be dangerous. So I'm learning. They rode in silence for another mile before Ayla spoke again, her voice softer. Tell me about the war, the one you fought in. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Why? Because I want to understand you, and because I suspect what you saw there shaped the man who cut my chains. He'd spent years not talking about the war, not thinking about it, burying it so deep he could almost pretend it hadn't happened. It was supposed to be about principles, he said finally, about freedom and rights, and all those grand words politicians use. But on the ground, it was just mud and blood, and boys dying for reasons they didn't understand. He paused. I saw good men do terrible things, saw terrible men do good things, and I learned that the line between hero and monster is thinner than anyone wants to admit. What did you do? What I was told. What I had to. What I thought was right at the time. He met her eyes. I killed people, Ayla. A lot of people. Some deserved it, some didn't. And every one of them follows me around, whispering in the quiet moments. Is that why you came out here? To escape them? To try? Doesn't work, but a man can hope. She reached across the distance between their horses and took his hand. Just for a moment. Just long enough to tell him he wasn't alone with those ghosts. Clara's ranch appeared on the horizon around midday. A sprawling complex of buildings protected by high walls and strategic positioning. It had been built with defense in mind, every angle calculated to give defenders advantage over attackers. My husband built this place 30 years ago, Clara explained as they approached. He said if you're going to have enemies, you'd better have walls. Turned out he was right. Inside the compound, organized chaos reigned. People moved with purpose, tending animals, maintaining weapons, preparing meals. This wasn't just a ranch, it was a fortress, a headquarters. Clara led them to the main house, a solid stone structure that looked like it could withstand a siege. Inside, the walls were lined with maps and documents, a war room disguised as a parlor. You two need rest, Claire said. Food, clean clothes, real beds. We can talk strategy tomorrow. A woman appeared, middle-aged, kind-faced, and led them deeper into the house. She showed Caleb to a small but clean room with a real bed and a window overlooking the courtyard. Washroom's down the hall, she said. I'll bring food shortly. You look like you could use about 3 days of sleep. I could use a week, but I'll settle for what I can get. She smiled and left. Caleb sat on the bed, feeling the softness of a real mattress for the first time in what felt like forever. The adrenaline that had kept him moving was finally fading, leaving only bone-deep exhaustion. But he didn't sleep, not yet. Instead, he stood at the window watching the compound's activity, trying to understand what he'd walked into. A knock at the door. Ayla entered without waiting for an invitation. How are your ribs? He asked. Hurt like hell, but Clara's doctor rewrapped them properly. She moved to stand beside him at the window. This is real, isn't it? This rebellion, this war. Seems like it. And we're in the middle of it now. Also seems like it. She turned to face him. Caleb, you still have a choice. You could take one of Clara's horses tonight. Ride west. By morning, you'd be far enough away that none of this would follow you. Why do you keep trying to get rid of me? Because I care what happens to you. Because you didn't ask for any of this. And because... She paused. Because I've seen what war does to people. I've seen my father and the Carvers turn into monsters in the name of power. I don't want that to happen to you. It won't. You can't know that. War changes everyone. Then maybe I need to be around people who'll remind me who I am. People like you. She looked away, but not before he saw something flicker in her eyes. Gratitude, maybe. Or hope. I'm not good at this, she said quietly. At trusting people. At letting them in. My father taught me that everyone wants something, and if you can't figure out what it is, you're the one being used. What do you think I want? I don't know. That's what scares me. Caleb moved closer, but didn't touch her. I want to see you safe. I want to see you free. I want to see you make choices because you want to, not because someone's forcing you. That's all I want. Why? Because in a world full of people who take, I'd like to be someone who gives, even if it costs me everything. She studied his face, searching for deception or hidden motives. Finding none, she did something unexpected. She stepped forward and rested her forehead against his shoulder. You're a good man, Caleb Rourke. I'm not used to good men. He carefully put his arms around her, mindful of her injuries. For a moment, they just stood there, two broken people holding each other up. A sharp knock interrupted them. They stepped apart as Thomas entered. Clara wants to see you both. Now. The war room was full when they arrived. 20 people crowded around a large table covered in maps and papers. Clara stood at the head, her expression grim. We have news, she said without preamble. Marcus has heard about the attack. He's calling a gathering of all family heads for 3 days from now. He's claiming I've kidnapped Ayla, that I'm using her to try to seize control of the family. Which is exactly what he'd do, someone muttered. The gathering will be at the old mission. Neutral ground, supposedly. All the major families will be there. Vance loyalists, fence sitters, and those sympathetic to our cause. It's a trap, Thomas said flatly. Of course it's a trap. But it's also an opportunity. Clara looked at Ayla. If you can testify there in front of witnesses from every major family about what Marcus did to you, they won't believe her, a woman said. They'll say she's lying, that we coached her. Not if we have proof. Clara pulled out a document. I have affidavits from 3 of Marcus's men who were there when he gave the order. They're willing to testify. They're dead men walking, Thomas observed. They know, but they're tired of what the family has become, tired of the cruelty. Ayla moved to the table, studying the maps. Even if we convince some of them, Marcus won't step down peacefully. He'll fight. Then we fight back. With what? 43 riders against his private army? Clara smiled. 43 here. But we have allies. Other families who are tired of Marcus's rule. Other ranchers who've suffered under the Carvers. If we can show them that Marcus has lost his moral authority, that even his own family stands against him, they'll join us. You're gambling that people will care about morality over power, Caleb said. I'm gambling that enough people will. That's how change happens. Not all at once, but person by person, choice by choice. The discussion continued for another hour, people arguing strategy and tactics. Caleb listened, learning the complex web of alliances and grudges that define this region's power structure. It was like the war all over again. Different uniforms, same human ugliness. Finally, Clara dismissed everyone except Ayla and Caleb. I need to know, she said once they were alone. Are you with us? Both of you? Ayla looked at Caleb. He looked back. A whole conversation happened in that glance. What happens if we refuse? Ayla asked. I'll give you horses and supplies, let you disappear. But Marcus will keep hunting you. He can't afford to let you live. You know too much. And your existence is a challenge to his authority. And if we agree? Then you become the face of this rebellion. The proof that Marcus Vance has become a tyrant. It won't be easy. It won't be safe. But it might actually change something. Caleb spoke up. What do you get out of this? Really? Clara met his eyes without flinching. I get to stop my brother before he destroys everything our family built. I get to look at myself in the mirror again. And maybe, just maybe, I get to help create a world where women like Ayla aren't treated as property. Pretty words, but I fought in a war full of pretty words. They didn't mean much when boys were dying in the mud. Then don't believe my words. Believe my actions. I'm risking everything for this. My position, my wealth, my life. That's not rhetoric. That's commitment. Ayla walked to the window, looking out at the compound. If I do this, if I testify, there's no going back. I'll be permanently at war with my father. You've been at war with him since you refused the marriage. This just makes it official. And puts everyone else in danger, everyone who follows me. They're already in danger. The question is whether that danger means something or not. Caleb joined Ayla at the window. What do you want to do? She laughed softly. What I want is to go back to before all this started. To be a girl riding her horse beyond the fence lines, feeling free. But that girl is dead. Marcus killed her when he had me beaten and chained. So who are you now? I don't know yet, but I think I want to find out. She turned to Clara. I'll testify. I'll tell everyone what he did, but I have conditions. Name them. First, Caleb's protection is guaranteed. Whatever happens, he gets safe passage out of this territory if he wants it. Clara nodded. Agreed. Second, if we win, if Marcus falls, I don't take his place. I don't become the new tyrant. Power goes to a council. Multiple voices. No more dictators. That'll be harder to guarantee, but I'll support it. Third, the people who helped chain me to that fence, the ones who followed orders, they face justice. Real justice. Not revenge. Agreed. Anything else? Ayla looked at Caleb. And fourth, when this is over, if we survive, I get to make my own choices about my life. No obligations, no expectations, just freedom. That's all I've ever wanted for you, Clara said softly. Caleb cleared his throat. I have a condition too. Both women looked at him. I don't lead. I don't make speeches. I don't become a symbol. I'm just a man who helps where he can. That's all. Can you shoot straight and stand your ground? Thomas asked from the doorway. Apparently he'd been listening. When I have to. Then that's all we need. The decision was made. They would go to the gathering, face Marcus Vance in front of every major family, gamble everything on the hope that truth and justice still mattered in a world defined by power and violence. The next 2 days passed in intense preparation. Ayla spent hours with Clara's lawyers, reviewing testimony and preparing for every argument Marcus might make. Caleb trained with Thomas and the other fighters, learning their tactics and building trust through shared sweat and purpose. On the second evening, Caleb found Ayla on the compound wall, watching the sunset. Can't sleep? He asked. Too much in my head, too many what-ifs. He stood beside her. You don't have to do this, even now, even this late. Yes, I do, not because Clara needs me to, or because it's strategic, but because if I don't stand up now, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have made a difference. That's a heavy burden. I've been carrying heavy burdens my whole life. At least this one means something. They watched the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in violent reds and purples. Caleb, if this goes wrong, if Marcus wins, I need you to promise me something. What? Don't try to save me. Don't throw your life away for mine. Just ride. Get as far from here as you can and never look back. That's not a promise I can make. Why not? He turned to face her fully. Because I've spent 7 years running from things. From my past. From connections. From caring about anyone or anything beyond my own survival. And I'm done running. Whatever happens at that gathering, we face it together. That's foolish. Probably, but it's my kind of foolish. She smiled, small and sad. You're going to get yourself killed. Not if I can help it. I've got too much to live for now. Like what? Like seeing what kind of world we can build if we actually win this thing. Like watching you figure out who you want to be when nobody's telling you who you have to be. He paused. Like maybe having someone to share breakfast with who doesn't think I'm crazy for living out here. I definitely think you're crazy, just for different reasons now. I'll take it. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Then Ayla leaned in and kissed him, gentle, careful of her still healing lip, but unmistakable in its intention. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. For luck, for courage, for whatever comes next. That's a lot of weight for one kiss to carry. Then we'll have to try more later, see if they can handle the burden. Despite everything, the danger, the uncertainty, the looming confrontation, Caleb laughed. Real laughter, the kind he hadn't felt in years. On the third morning, they rode out. 50 riders now. Clara had called in every ally she could trust. They moved in formation toward the old mission, each person lost in their own thoughts about what the day might bring. The mission sat in a valley between two ridges, its ancient stone walls weathered but still standing. It had been built by people who came before any of them, seeking salvation in the harsh land. Now it would host a very different kind of reckoning. They arrived at midday to find the mission grounds already crowded. Easily 200 people, representing every major family in the territory. Marcus had clearly been rallying support, painting Clara as a traitor and Ayla as a victim of kidnapping. Marcus himself stood on the mission steps, flanked by 30 armed men. He looked every inch the powerful patriarch, tall, commanding, his presence demanding attention. When he saw Ayla, his expression flickered, surprise, then calculation, then a mask of concerned fatherly worry. "Ayla," he called out, "thank heavens, these traitors told me you were dead." She didn't respond, just stared at him with cold contempt. Clara rode forward. "Marcus, we need to talk, all of us, about what our family has become. The only thing we need to discuss is your arrest for kidnapping and conspiracy. Is that what you call it when someone rescues your daughter from where you left her to die?" A murmur ran through the crowd. Marcus's face darkened. "I don't know what lies she's told you, but—" "No lies," Ayla said, her voice carrying across the gathering. She dismounted, moving to stand where everyone could see her. "Only truth, the truth about what you did to me, what you ordered done. I protected you, tried to guide you, and you repaid me with betrayal. I refused to marry a cruel man. That's not betrayal, that's survival." The crowd was riveted now, sensing drama. Marcus clearly wanted to shut this down, but he couldn't without looking weak. "This is a family matter," he tried, "not for public discussion." "You made it public when you had me chained to a fence for 3 days." Ayla's voice cracked with fury. "When you had your men beat me and leave me to die like a diseased animal, you made it everyone's business when you decided your daughter was property to be disposed of." Shocked silence. Then chaos. People shouting questions, demanding answers, choosing sides. Marcus raised his hands, trying to regain control. "She's clearly been traumatized, doesn't know what she's saying. Someone needs to help her." "I know exactly what I'm saying." Ayla pulled off her jacket, revealing the still healing wounds on her arms, the bruises on her ribs. "These are your handiwork, your orders, your men." She pointed to 3 men in the crowd, the ones who'd given Clara affidavits. "They were there. They followed your orders. Ask them." The 3 men looked at each other, then stepped forward. Marcus's face went pale with rage. "Traitors," he hissed. "Truth-tellers," Clara corrected. "Gentlemen, tell them what you told me." What followed was devastating. 3 separate accounts corroborating every detail of Ayla's story. The beating, the chains, the orders to leave her until she begged for death. By the time they finished, the crowd's mood had shifted dramatically. Marcus tried to salvage it. "They're lying! Paid by Clara to destroy me!" "I have documents," Clara called out. "Written orders in your hand, testimony from a dozen witnesses, physical evidence." She signaled, and her people began distributing papers throughout the crowd. Proof. Undeniable, documented proof of Marcus Vance's crimes. Caleb watched it unfold from his horse, hand near his rifle. This was the moment, the tipping point. Either the crowd would accept the truth, or they'd double down on supporting Marcus. Either way, violence felt inevitable. Then someone unexpected stepped forward, John Carver, the man Ayla had been promised to marry. "I was there," he said, his voice carrying, "when Marcus gave the orders. I heard every word, and I approved." He looked at Ayla with something that might have been regret. "I wanted you broken. Wanted you to know the cost of refusing me. Your father wanted you punished for disobedience, so we collaborated." The confession stunned everyone, Marcus most of all. "You fool," Marcus breathed. "You've doomed us both." "No," John said. "You doomed us when you decided that power mattered more than honor, when you turned our family names into curses." He looked around at the gathered families. "I'm guilty. I won't pretend otherwise, but I'm done pretending this is acceptable. Done pretending we're the good ones." The dam broke. Other voices rose. People sharing their own stories of abuse under Marcus's rule, of injustices ignored, of cruelties excused in the name of family loyalty and tradition. Marcus saw it slipping away, saw his power crumbling in real time, and like any cornered predator, he attacked. Enough! His hand went to his gun. I won't be judged by traitors and weaklings. 30 rifles came up on Marcus's side, 50 on Clara's. The mission grounds held its breath. Ayla stepped into the no-man's land between the two forces, utterly exposed. Father, she said quietly, this ends now. One way or another. You can fight, and people will die. Maybe you win, maybe you lose, but the family tears itself apart. Or you can accept that your time is over, that a new generation gets to decide what we become. You think I'll surrender to a child? I think you'll surrender to truth, to justice, to the weight of everything you've done finally catching up with you. Marcus looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and for just a moment, Caleb saw something crack in his expression. Not quite remorse, but recognition. He'd broken something precious, and there was no putting it back together. Then the moment passed. Marcus's face hardened into pure hatred. I'd rather burn it all down than hand it to you. His hand moved toward his gun. Time seemed to slow. Caleb was already moving, already urging his horse forward to shield Ayla. But he wasn't the only one. 20 people moved at once, Clara's forces, Marcus's own men, even some neutrals. All of them stepping between Marcus and his daughter, forming a human wall. Stand down, Marcus, Clara said. It's over. He looked around at the guns pointed at him, at his own people refusing to follow his lead, at the family he'd ruled through fear finally saying enough. The gun fell from his hand. You've won nothing, he said to Ayla. Nothing but enemies and war and a target on your back. Maybe, she replied, but I've won my freedom, and that's everything. Marcus Vance's surrender should have ended it, should have brought peace to the valley and closure to the confrontation. But freedom, Caleb had learned long ago, was never that simple. The moment Marcus's gun hit the dirt, the real battle began, not with bullets and blood, but with words sharp as knives and choices that would reshape everything. The crowd erupted into chaos. Some cheered, sensing justice finally served. Others stood frozen, uncertain what a world without Marcus's iron rule would look like. And a few, Marcus's most loyal followers, looked ready to fight regardless of their leader's capitulation. Bind him, Clara ordered, her voice cutting through the noise. And John Carver. They'll face proper judgment, not mob justice. Thomas and 2 others moved forward to secure Marcus, but the old patriarch jerked away from their touch, his dignity still intact despite his defeat. I can walk on my own, Marcus snarled. I won't be dragged like a common criminal. You are a common criminal, Ayla said quietly, still standing in the open space between the two forces. You just had enough power that no one called you one until now. Their eyes met, father and daughter, 2 people who shared blood but nothing else anymore. Whatever love might have existed between them had been beaten out of her and burned away from him. You'll regret this, Marcus said. Power doesn't disappear, it just changes hands, and the hands that take it are rarely gentler than the ones that held it before. Then we'll have to prove you wrong. Marcus laughed, bitter and sharp. You're naive, just like your mother was, and look what that got her. Ayla's hand moved toward the gun at her hip. Caleb saw the rage flash across her face, the desire for vengeance that would be so easy to claim. But her hand stopped halfway, trembling with the effort of restraint. I'm nothing like my mother, she said. She let you break her. I won't. She turned her back on him, the ultimate dismissal, and walked toward Clara. Marcus was led away, still spitting curses and predictions of doom, but his words had lost their power. Without fear to feed on, they were just the ravings of a fallen tyrant. John Carver went quietly, his confession having stripped away any pretense of righteousness. As he passed Ayla, he stopped. For what it's worth, he said, I am sorry, not for getting caught, not for losing, but for what I did to you. You deserved better. Yes, Ayla replied, I did. So did a lot of people. He nodded and continued on, accepting his fate with more grace than Marcus had shown. The crowd began to settle, but the tension hadn't dissipated. It had just changed shape. Now came the harder question. What next? Clara climbed onto a wagon bed so everyone could see her. We've witnessed something today that many thought impossible. We've seen power held accountable, truth spoken in the face of violence. But witnessing isn't enough. Now we have to build something better from what we've torn down. Who put you in charge? Someone shouted from the crowd. You're just Marcus's sister. Why should we follow another Vance? You shouldn't, Clara said simply. Not blindly, not without question. That's how we got into this mess. She gestured to the assembled families. Every family represented here has a voice. Every person has a stake in what we build. I'm proposing we form a council. Representatives from each major family, elected by their own people. Equal votes, equal say. No more dictators. Murmurs rippled through the gathering, some approving, some skeptical, all uncertain. That'll never work, someone called out. Too many voices. Nothing will get decided. Better than one voice deciding everything, another countered. Caleb watched from his horse as democracy tried to take root in soil that had only ever known tyranny. It was messy, chaotic, full of arguments and competing interests. It was also the most hopeful thing he'd seen in years. A woman pushed forward from the crowd, older, weathered, with the bearing of someone used to hard work and harder choices. I'm Sarah Chen, she announced. My family has ranched in this territory for 3 generations. Marcus took half our water rights 5 years ago, said it was for the greater good, for family unity. She spat on the ground. I want to believe this council idea is real, but I've heard pretty promises before. Clara nodded. Then don't trust promises. Trust actions. We'll draft rules today, right here, right now, with everyone watching. Every family gets input, every concern gets heard, and we'll set a date, 1 month from now, for the first proper council election. 1 month? Someone protested. That's too fast. It's just too slow, someone else argued. We need leadership now. Then we'll have temporary leadership, Clara said. 5 people, chosen right now by consensus, who hold authority only until the election. After that, the people decide. It was brilliant, Caleb thought. Not perfect, but workable. A bridge between the old world and whatever new one they were trying to build. The arguments continued for another hour. Tempers flared and cooled. Compromises were struck. And slowly, painfully, something resembling agreement emerged. 5 temporary council members. Clara Vance, for her role in bringing down Marcus. Sarah Chen, representing the smaller ranching families. David Martinez, a merchant with connections across the territory. Rachel Moss, who'd lost family to Marcus's cruelty and wanted justice. And to everyone's surprise, Thomas, Clara's lieutenant, who commanded respect from the fighters who'd made this confrontation possible. This council will establish rules for the election, Clara explained. We'll maintain order. We'll begin the work of redistributing resources Marcus and the Carvers stole. And will face judgment themselves if they abuse the trust we're placing in them. And who judges the judges? Someone asked. All of us, Clara replied. That's the point. It was imperfect. It was fragile. But it was a start. As the crowd began to disperse, people clustering in small groups to debate and digest what had happened, Ayla approached Caleb. We did it, she said, but she didn't sound victorious. She sounded exhausted. You did it. I just stood around looking menacing. You were ready to put yourself between me and a bullet. That's more than just standing around. Caleb dismounted, stretching muscles that had been tensed for hours. What happens now? Clara wants me on the council. Well, are you going to do it? I don't know. Part of me wants to. Wants to help build something better. But another part, she looked toward where Marcus was being held under guard. Another part just wants to ride away from all of this and never look back. Both are valid choices. Are they? Is it really okay to walk away when people are counting on you? People have been counting on you your whole life. Maybe it's time you counted on yourself. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted near the mission entrance. Riders were approaching fast, at least 20 of them, armed and riding hard. Instantly, guns came up. People scattered or took defensive positions. The fragile peace shattered into readiness for violence. But these weren't Marcus's loyalists or Carver sympathizers. As they got closer, Caleb recognized their colors. Red and black, the marks of the Bridger family, one of the largest ranching operations in the territory. They'd been notably absent from the gathering. The riders pulled up in a cloud of dust. Their leader dismounted, a woman in her 40s with iron-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Catherine Bridger, Clara said, stepping forward. We sent word about the gathering. You didn't respond. Because we were dealing with this, Catherine replied, gesturing to her riders. Several were wounded, others looked like they'd ridden through hell. The Carver loyalists, the ones who weren't here. They hit our ranch 2 hours ago, burned 3 buildings, ran off 50 head of cattle, and killed 2 of my people. The gathering went silent. Why? Clara demanded. As a message. They said if we supported the rebellion, this was just the beginning. They said Marcus might have surrendered, but they hadn't. Thomas swore. How many of them? At least 40 that we saw. Could be more. They're organized, well-armed, and they've got nothing to lose now. The temporary victory suddenly felt very temporary. Marcus might have been captured, but his ideology, his belief in power through violence, had spread like poison through the territory. Taking down the man didn't automatically eliminate the system he'd built. Claire's face hardened. Where are they now? Road west, toward the canyon country. They've got supplies, weapons, and they know that terrain better than anyone. Then we go after them, Thomas said immediately, before they have time to entrench. We don't have the forces, someone argued. Half the people here came to witness, not to fight. If we don't deal with them now, they'll pick us off one by one, Sarah Chen said. Catherine's ranch today, mine tomorrow. They'll make examples until we're too scared to support the council. Caleb watched the debate unfold, recognizing the pattern. This was how rebellions failed. Not in the dramatic confrontation, but in the grinding aftermath when reality proved more complicated than idealism expected. Ayla moved to the center of the gathering again. We need information first. We need to know their numbers, their position, their intentions. We can't just charge into the canyon country without a plan. Then what do you suggest? Catherine asked. Send scouts. Fast, light, experienced. They map the enemy position while we consolidate our forces and prepare a proper response. That could take days, Thomas protested. Days they'll use to plan their next attack. Better than getting our people killed in an ambush, Ayla countered. The argument continued, voices rising until Clara raised her hand for silence. Ayla's right. We need intelligence. Thomas, pick your 3 best scouts. Send them tonight. The rest of us fortify here at the mission. It's defensible, it's neutral ground, and it sends a message. We're not running. What about our homes? Someone called out. Our families? We send riders to evacuate anyone vulnerable. Bring them here or to one of the fortified ranches. The Carver loyalists want to terrorize us into submission. We don't let them. It was the right call, Caleb thought. Not aggressive enough to be reckless, not passive enough to be weak. But it meant more waiting, more uncertainty, more time for fear to work its way into people's hearts. As the gathering reorganized itself into a defensive posture, Caleb found himself drafted into Thomas's planning session. Apparently word had spread about his military experience. We need to think like they do, Thomas was saying, maps spread across a table they'd hauled from the mission. They're raiders now, not an organized force. They'll hit fast, do damage, and run. Classic guerrilla tactics. Then we need to deny them easy targets, Caleb said. Consolidate the population. Fortify key positions. Make every attack costly enough that they can't sustain the losses. That's defensive thinking. We need to take the fight to them. Taking the fight to them in canyon country is suicide. They know every ravine, every hiding spot. We'd be walking into a meat grinder. David Martinez leaned forward. What if we don't need to go to them? What if we make them come to us? How? They want to destroy the council before it can establish legitimacy. So we make the council visible. Announce the election date. Start redistributing Marcus's stolen resources. Show everyone that the new way is working. That'll draw them out. That's using ourselves as bait, Rachel Moss said. It's using the truth as bait, David corrected. The best way to defeat their violence is to prove our system works better than theirs. Caleb respected the idealism, but doubted the practicality. You're assuming they care about winning hearts and minds. They don't. They care about power. And right now, we've threatened their entire worldview. So what do we do? Thomas demanded. Hide? Wait for them to pick us apart? We do both, Ayla said, entering the planning session. We defend our people and we build the new system. We show that violence won't stop us from creating something better. But we also prepare for the fight that's coming. Because it is coming. She looked at the maps, her tactical mind clearly working through scenarios. The canyon country has 3 main access points. If we position forces at each one, we can't stop them from raiding, but we can track their movements, learn their patterns. Eventually, they'll make a mistake. That could take weeks, Thomas said. Then it takes weeks. We're not trying to win one battle. We're trying to build something that lasts beyond any of us. The planning continued deep into the night. Caleb contributed what he could, drawing on memories of tactics that had worked and failed in his war. But mostly he watched Ayla, saw her transform from the wounded woman he'd freed from chains into a leader people naturally looked to for guidance. She didn't want it. He could see that in the way she tensed when people deferred to her judgment. But she accepted it anyway because someone had to, and she was too stubborn to watch everything fall apart through inaction. Around midnight, Caleb stepped outside for air. The mission courtyard was full of people bedding down for the night, families huddled together, fighters taking watch shifts. It looked like a refugee camp, which, in a way, it was. Ayla found him standing by the old mission well, looking up at stars that cared nothing for human struggles. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "Too much in my head." "Join the club." She leaned against the well beside him. "I keep thinking about what my father said, about power just changing hands. What if he's right? What if we're just recreating the same system with different faces? Then you fight that too, one choice at a time, one day at a time." "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple, but it's not impossible either." He looked at her. "You proved that today. You stood in front of everyone and told the truth, even knowing it could get you killed. That changed something. Maybe not everything, but something. One woman's testimony against decades of tyranny. It doesn't feel like enough. It never does. But you keep doing it anyway. That's what separates the people who change the world from the ones who just complain about it." She smiled faintly. "Philosopher Rancher strikes again. I read a lot, remember?" They stood in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds. Crickets, distant horses, the murmur of people trying to find rest in uncertain times. "Caleb, I need to ask you something." "All right. Why are you still here? You could have left a dozen times, could still leave right now, ride out, find new land, start over somewhere all this craziness can't follow. But you stay. Why?" He took his time answering, wanting to get it right. "For 7 years I lived alone, convinced myself it was what I wanted. Peace, quiet, simplicity. No complications, no connections, no one to care about or lose." He paused. "But it wasn't peace. It was just emptiness, pretending to be something noble. And now? Now I've got something worth staying for, someone worth standing beside. A fight that actually means something beyond just survival. I'm worth staying for? You are. This is all of it. The mess, the danger, the uncertainty. Because it's real. It's trying to be something better than what came before. And I'd rather die fighting for that than live another day in comfortable isolation." Ayla turned to face him fully. "You realize how insane that sounds, right? You're choosing war over peace." "I'm choosing purpose over emptiness. There's a difference." She kissed him then, deeper than before, with an urgency born of knowing tomorrow was promised to no one. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I don't know how this ends," she said. "I don't know if we win or lose, if we live or die, if any of this matters in the long run. Neither do I. But I'm glad you're here. Glad I'm not facing it alone. You were never going to face it alone. Too many people believe in what you represent. They don't believe in me. They believe in the idea of me, the symbol. Marcus's daughter who stood up to tyranny. That's not real. Then show them what's real. Be the person, not the symbol. What if the person isn't enough?" She freed herself from chains. She stood in front of a mob and spoke truth. She's building a new world from the ashes of the old one. I'd say the person is more than enough. Ayla rested her head against his shoulder, and they stood there under the stars, stealing a moment of peace before the storm. The scouts returned 3 days later, exhausted and bearing grim news. The Carver Loyalists had established a base camp in the canyon country, well defended and clearly planning for a long campaign. Their numbers had swollen. Apparently Marcus's surrender had radicalized his most devoted followers rather than discouraged them. 75 fighters, maybe 80, one scout reported. They've got supplies for months, and they're recruiting, promising revenge and a return to the old ways. The temporary council gathered to hear the full report. Maps were updated, strategies debated, Arguments flared about the best course of action. We can't let them grow stronger, Thomas insisted. Every day we wait, they recruit more people. Every day we wait, we grow stronger too, Rachel countered. More families are joining the council, more resources being pooled. Resources don't matter if we're too dead to use them. Clara raised her hand for quiet. We're missing the larger picture. This isn't just about defeating 80 fighters in the canyon. It's about proving that our way works. That governance through consensus is stronger than governance through fear. Pretty sentiment, Catherine Bridger said, but my dead ranch hands might disagree. I'm not dismissing their sacrifice, Claire replied. I'm saying we honor it by building something they'd be proud to have died for. If we descend into the same violence we're trying to end, what's the point? The point is survival, Catherine shot back. You can't build anything if you're dead. The argument continued, and Caleb found himself agreeing with both sides. They needed to defend themselves, but they also needed to be different from Marcus. The question was how to do both without compromising either. Ayla had been quiet throughout the debate, studying the maps with intense focus. Finally, she spoke. We're thinking about this wrong. We're treating this like a military problem, but it's a political one. Everyone turned to her. Explain, Clara said. The Carver loyalists think they're fighting for the old way, for tradition and strength and the natural order of power. They think we're weak because we're trying to build consensus instead of demanding obedience. She stood, pointing to the map. So we prove them wrong. We show that our way delivers what theirs never could: actual security, actual prosperity, actual justice. How? Thomas demanded. We start redistributing Marcus's holdings. Every family that Marcus cheated gets back what he stole. We document it. Make it public. Show concrete results from the new system. That'll take weeks, someone protested. So we do it in phases. Start with the most egregious cases. Sarah, didn't you say Marcus took your water rights? Half of them, yes. Then as the council's first official act, we return them, publicly, with witnesses from every family. We show that the new way delivers real results, not just promises. David Martinez nodded slowly. That's smart. It undercuts their entire narrative, makes them look like they're fighting against people's interests rather than for them. It also paints a target on everyone who accepts the redistributed resources, Catherine warned. The loyalists will hit them hardest. Then we protect them, Thomas said. Concentrated defense of specific targets is easier than trying to protect everything at once. The debate shifted, taking on new energy as the strategy crystallized. Not just defense or offense, but a coordinated campaign to prove the new system worked while preparing for the violence that resistance would bring. Caleb watched it come together and felt something he hadn't felt since before the war. Hope. Not naive optimism, but genuine belief that maybe, just maybe, this group of imperfect people could build something worth defending. The council session continued for hours, hammering out details and addressing concerns. By the time they finished, they had a plan. Imperfect, risky, but workable. As people dispersed to begin implementation, Ayla caught Caleb's arm. I need you to do something for me. Name it. Go with the first redistribution party. Sarah's getting her water rights back, but she'll be vulnerable. I need someone I trust watching over her. You trust me that much? I trust you with my life. This is just property. Caleb nodded. I'll keep her safe. And Caleb, if the loyalists come, if it turns into a fight, don't try to be a hero. Just get everyone out alive. I'll do my best. That's what I'm afraid of. Your best usually involves putting yourself between other people and bullets. Old habits. She kissed him quickly. Come back to me. We've got a world to build, and I need you here for it. Yes, ma'am. The redistribution party rode out the next morning. Sarah Chen, 2 of her ranch hands, Caleb, and 3 of Thomas's best fighters. They carried official documents from the council and enough weapons to defend themselves if necessary. The ride to Sarah's ranch took most of the day. It was hard country, beautiful in its harshness, full of arroyos and mesas that offered both stunning views and perfect ambush positions. Marcus's men used to ride this way every month, Sarah said as they traveled, collecting what he called administration fees for managing the water rights. Really just stealing from us while pretending it was legal. How long did this go on? Caleb asked. 5 years. 5 years of watching my family's work benefit someone who did nothing to earn it. Her jaw tightened. You can't know what it's like, having something stolen from you not by bandits, but by people claiming to act for the greater good. I can imagine. They reached Sarah's ranch in late afternoon, a modest operation with good grazing land and access to a stream that provided water for cattle, or would have if half the flow wasn't diverted to Marcus's holdings upstream. Tomorrow we'll ride to the diversion point, Sarah said. Tear down his barriers and restore the natural flow. It won't happen overnight, but in a few weeks this land will support twice the herd it does now. That night, Caleb took first watch, circling the ranch house and outbuildings, checking sight lines and escape routes out of habit. The land was quiet, but quiet could be deceptive. Around midnight he heard it, the faint sound of horses moving carefully, trying to be silent. He counted at least a dozen riders approaching from the north. He whistled softly, the prearranged signal. Inside the house, lamps extinguished. People moved to defensive positions they'd discussed earlier. Sarah and her hands grabbed rifles. Thomas's fighters readied themselves at windows and doorways. The riders stopped just beyond rifle range. A voice called out across the darkness. Sarah Chen, you're harboring rebels. Send them out and maybe we'll spare your ranch. Sarah moved to the door, rifle in hand. This is my land. These people are here at my invitation. You've got no authority here. Laughter echoed back. Authority comes from strength, old woman, and you've chosen the wrong side. There shouldn't be sides, just people trying to live decent lives. Decency is weakness. Marcus understood that. The natural order is strength over weakness, and you're weak. Caleb recognized the voice now. One of the Carver cousins, a young man named Vincent, who'd grown up believing violence made him important. Last chance, Vincent called. Send out the rebels or we burn you out. Sarah looked at Caleb. He shook his head. Giving in wouldn't save her. It would just mark her as someone who could be intimidated. Come and try, Sarah shouted back. The attack came fast. Riders charging from 3 directions, firing as they came, torches ready to set buildings ablaze. But they'd underestimated their opponents. The defenders had good positions and clear sightlines. Caleb's first shot took a rider from his saddle. Thomas's fighters dropped 2 more in quick succession. The charge faltered, confused by resistance they hadn't expected. Vincent rallied them. There are only 8. We're 12. Push through. They tried. Fire arrows landed on roofs. Caleb climbed up to stamp them out, while still firing down at attackers. Sarah's ranch hands proved to be excellent shots, their familiarity with the land giving them advantage over riders struggling to find cover in unfamiliar territory. The fight lasted maybe 10 minutes, an eternity in combat time. When it ended, 5 of the attackers lay dead or dying. The rest had fled, including Vincent, his shoulder bloodied from a grazing shot. Check the bodies, Caleb ordered. See if any can be saved. 3 were dead. 2 were wounded but alive. Thomas's fighters bound their wounds and secured them as prisoners. What do we do with them? One of the fighters asked. We take them back to the council, Caleb said. Let them face justice the new way. Prove we're different from Marcus. Sarah looked at the damage to her ranch. Bullet holes, scorch marks, but the building's still standing. They'll come back. More of them next time. Then we'll be ready, Caleb replied. And in the meantime, we restore your water rights. Show everyone that standing with the council has real benefits, not just risks. They worked through the night, taking turns on watch and repairing damage. At dawn, they rode to the diversion point Marcus had built, an elaborate series of barriers and channels that redirected most of the stream's flow. It took 3 hours to dismantle. 3 hours of hard labor under the hot sun, always watching for another attack that never came. When they were done, water flowed naturally again, following the course it had carved over thousands of years. Sarah stood by the restored stream, tears running down her weathered face. I never thought I'd see this again. Never thought anyone would stand up to Marcus. Never thought justice was possible. It's possible, Caleb said. Just hard. And expensive. But possible. They rode back to the mission with the 2 prisoners, carrying evidence of both the attack and the successful redistribution. It was a small victory, but it proved the concept could work. Ayla met them at the mission gates, relief flooding her face when she saw Caleb unharmed. I heard there was fighting. There was. We handled it. Anyone hurt on our side? Minor wounds, nothing serious. But we took prisoners, and we restored Sarah's water rights. The prisoners were brought before the temporary council. Vincent's cousin, who gave his name as Robert, agreed to testify about the Loyalist camp in exchange for leniency. The information he provided was invaluable: numbers, positions, supply lines, internal divisions. "They're not as unified as they seem," Robert said, his arm bandaged from where a bullet had grazed it. "A lot of people joined because they're scared. They don't know what the new system means, so they're clinging to the old one. But they're not fanatics, not all of them." "Could they be reasoned with?" Clara asked. "Maybe. If you could show them the new way isn't about destroying everything they know. If you could prove there's a place for them in what you're building." It was a slim hope, but it was hope nonetheless. The council debated long into the night. Some wanted to press the advantage, strike while the Loyalists were divided. Others advocated for outreach, for trying to peel away the less committed before resorting to violence. Ayla listened to all sides, then offered her perspective. "We do both. We extend an offer. Anyone who lays down arms and accepts council authority gets amnesty and a voice in the new system. But we also prepare for those who won't accept. We can be merciful and strong. The two aren't mutually exclusive." The council voted. The offer would be made publicly, with a deadline. After that, the Loyalists would be treated as what they were: enemies of the people, not defenders of tradition. As the meeting adjourned, Caleb found himself thinking about the battles to come. They'd won today, but the war was far from over. The real test would be whether they could maintain their principles while fighting for survival, whether they could build something new without becoming the very thing they'd fought to destroy. Ayla found him later, sitting alone on the mission wall, watching the stars. "You're brooding again." "Just thinking." "About?" "About how easy it would be to become like Marcus. To decide that the ends justify the means. That violence in service of a good cause is somehow noble. You won't let that happen." "How do you know?" "Because you're you. Because you cut chains instead of forging them. Because you see people as people, not tools or obstacles." She sat beside him. "We'll make mistakes. We'll have to make hard choices. But as long as we keep questioning ourselves, keep checking our principles against our actions, we'll stay on the right path." That's a lot of faith to put in human nature. I'm not putting faith in human nature. I'm putting faith in specific humans, in you, in Clara, in everyone who chooses every day to try to be better than they were yesterday. Caleb put his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, new tests of whether their ideals could survive contact with reality. But tonight, they had this: a moment of peace, a shared purpose, and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, they were building something that would last. The offer went out 3 days later, carried by riders to every corner of the territory and posted at every crossroads and gathering place. The words were simple, drafted by the council after hours of debate and revision, designed to extend mercy without appearing weak. To all who followed Marcus Vance and the Carver family, the old order has fallen. A new way is rising, built on justice and shared governance. We offer amnesty to any who lay down arms and accept council authority before the next full moon. You will have a voice in what we build. You will have a place in the future. But those who continue violence against the people will be met with the full force of our united defense. Choose wisely. Choose quickly. Choose freedom over fear. Caleb watched from the mission courtyard as the last rider departed with copies of the declaration. Ayla stood beside him, her face unreadable. "Think any of them will accept?" he asked. "Some will. The ones Robert talked about, the scared ones, the uncertain ones. But the true believers?" She shook her head. "They'll see it as weakness, proof that we're soft. Then they'll be wrong. Being wrong won't stop them from fighting." She was right, of course. The next 2 weeks proved it. The amnesty offer had an unexpected effect. It split the Loyalist camp, but not cleanly. Some accepted, trickling back to their homes with heads down and rifles surrendered. Others became more radicalized, viewing the defectors as traitors and the council as an existential threat. The attacks increased. Small, vicious raids on isolated farms, ambushes of council supply wagons, nighttime fires that destroyed crops and buildings. The Loyalists couldn't win a direct confrontation, so they waged a campaign of terror, trying to make life under the new system unbearable. Catherine Bridger lost another ranch hand to a sniper's bullet. David Martinez's supply depot was burned to the ground. Even Clara's fortified ranch came under attack, though the raiders were repelled before doing serious damage. Each attack strengthened the resolve of council supporters, but it also wore them down. Fear became a constant companion. People started questioning whether the new system was worth the cost. The temporary council met every other day, trying to balance defense with governance, trying to prove they could handle both crisis and normalcy. We need to strike back, Thomas argued during one particularly heated session. Show them that attacking us has consequences. We have been striking back, Rachel replied. We've repelled every attack, killed or captured their raiders. What more do you want? I want to take the fight to their base, end this once and for all. And lose how many people in the canyon country? Clara shot back. They know that terrain. We don't. It would be a slaughter. So we just wait? Let them pick us off until we're too weak to resist? Ayla raised her hand for quiet. Over the past weeks, she'd become the council's unofficial mediator, the one person everyone seemed willing to listen to, despite her initial reluctance to take on that role. Thomas is right that we can't just absorb losses forever, but Clara's right that a direct assault is too risky. She stood, moving to the map that had become the center of all their strategic discussions. We need to change the equation, make them come to us on our terms. How? David asked. We announce the first official council election, make it a public event, invite every family in the territory, including those still sitting on the fence. We turn it into a celebration, not just of voting, but of what we've accomplished, the redistributed land, the returned rights, the justice we've delivered. That makes us a target, Catherine said. We're already a target, but this way we choose the ground. We prepare defenses. We make it so costly to attack that even the fanatics will think twice. Thomas leaned forward, interest sparking in his eyes. You want to use the election as bait? I want to use it as a statement that we're not cowering, that we're building the future regardless of their threats. And yes, if they're stupid enough to attack, we'll be ready. The debate continued, but Ayla's logic was sound. They couldn't hide forever. Better to force the confrontation on their terms, in a place they could defend, surrounded by witnesses who would see the truth of who was fighting for the people and who was fighting against them. The vote was close, but it passed. The election would be held in 3 weeks at the mission. Every family would be invited, every voice would count, and they would dare the loyalists to try to stop it. The announcement spread like wildfire across the territory. For council supporters, it was a moment of hope, proof that the new system was real, was happening, was going to continue regardless of opposition. For the undecided, it was a test. Would the council actually pull it off, or would violence derail it like it had derailed so many promises before? And for the loyalists, it was exactly what Ayla had predicted, a provocation too great to ignore. The response came 5 days later, delivered by a single rider who approached under a white flag. The mission guards led him through, escorting him to where the council was meeting. He was young, barely 20, with the haunted look of someone who'd seen too much violence too quickly. He handed Clara a sealed letter and stepped back, waiting. Clara broke the seal and read aloud. To the false council and its puppet leaders, your election is an abomination. The natural order is not decided by votes, but by strength. We will not allow this mockery of governance to proceed. Abandon your plans or face consequences beyond your imagination. This is your only warning. Signed, the True Vance Family Defense. True Vance Family Defense, Claire repeated, her voice dripping with contempt. They can't even come up with an original name. They can come up with violence, though, Thomas muttered, and they're telling us exactly what they plan to do. The messenger shifted uncomfortably. Rachel turned to him. Did they force you to deliver this? No, ma'am. I volunteered. Why? Because I wanted to see you. Wanted to see if you're what they say you are. Weak, foolish, doomed to fail. He looked around the room at the council members. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Ayla asked. I don't know. Soft people playing at power. But you... He gestured to the maps, the documents, the evidence of actual governance happening. You're really trying to build something. We are, Clara confirmed. And we're going to succeed, with or without your people's blessing. The messenger was quiet for a moment. There's maybe 40 of them left, the real fighters, the ones who'll die before they accept your counsel. But there's another 30 or so who are just scared, who don't know what else to do. Tell them they have a choice, Ayla said. Right up until they don't. Tell them the amnesty offer still stands, but after the election, there's no more fence sitting. You're with the council or against it. The messenger nodded. I'll tell them. But ma'am, the true believers, they're planning something big, something they think will break you. Let them plan, Clara said. We'll be ready. After the messenger left, the council shifted into full crisis mode. Thomas organized defensive positions around the mission. Catherine coordinated with surrounding ranches to create a network of early warning posts. David arranged for supplies to support a potential siege. Rachel worked on evacuation plans for non-combatants. And Ayla, along with Caleb, rode out to inspect the terrain around the mission, looking for vulnerabilities and advantages. They'll come from the north, Caleb said, studying the approaches. The south is too exposed. East and west have good sight lines. But the north has that arroyo system that could hide a force right up until they're on top of us. Then we mine it. Mine it? Not literally, but we set up observation posts, tripwires, anything that gives us advance warning. They want to use the terrain against us. We use it against them. They spent 3 days fortifying the northern approach, working alongside volunteers from various families. The work was hard, the sun merciless. But something unexpected happened. It built community. People who'd never met before worked side by side, sharing water and stories and slowly realizing they had more in common than they'd thought. One evening, as they finished setting the last observation post, a young woman approached Caleb. She couldn't have been more than 18, with dirt under her nails and determination in her eyes. You're Caleb Rourke, aren't you? The one who freed Ayla? I am. My father said you were crazy, said you threw your life away for someone you didn't know. Said you should have minded your own business. Your father might be right, she smiled. He also said he was wrong about that. Said you did what he should have done years ago when Marcus started taking people's land. Said you had more courage in one choice than he'd had in a lifetime of keeping quiet. What changed his mind? The water rights. Sarah Chen got hers back, and my father realized that maybe the council wasn't just talk. Maybe things could actually change. So he sent me here to help defend the election and to say thank you. After she left, Ayla came over, having heard the exchange. That's the third person today who's thanked you for freeing me. You're becoming a symbol whether you want to be or not. I didn't do it to be a symbol. I know. That's why it matters. She took his hand. Come on. Clara wants to run through defensive scenarios one more time. The War Council, that's what they'd started calling the strategy sessions, met that night in the mission's old chapel. Maps covered the altar. Weapons lined the walls. The sacred space had been repurposed for very earthly concerns. We're estimating 40 fighters coming at us, Thomas said. Could be more if they've recruited since Robert defected. They'll want to hit hard and fast, try to break our will before we can organize effective resistance. So we need to show them immediately that we're not breaking, Rachel said. First contact has to be decisive. What about civilian casualties? David asked. We're inviting families to this election, people who've never held a gun. If fighting breaks out, we evacuate non-combatants to the chapel, Clara interrupted. It's stone defensible. We hold them there while the fighters deal with the attack. Assuming we can deal with it, someone muttered. Ayla stood. We can deal with it. We have defensive positions, superior numbers, and the moral high ground. They're fighting to preserve a system that oppresses people. We're fighting to protect the right to choose our own leaders. That difference matters. To us, maybe, Catherine said. But to them, we're the oppressors. We overthrew the rightful order. They genuinely believe they're the heroes of this story. Then we'll have to educate them, Caleb said quietly. With bullets, if necessary. The room fell silent at that. The reality of what was coming, the violence, the death, the possibility of failure, hung heavy in the air. Clara broke the silence. Every person here volunteered for this. Every person defending the election knows what they're risking. We're not forcing anyone to fight. We're not conscripting soldiers or threatening deserters. We're just giving people the choice to stand for something better. And if we lose, someone asked, then we lose having tried, having stood for principle instead of power, having proven that another way is possible even if we couldn't make it permanent. Clara looked around the room. But we're not going to lose, because we have what they don't, actual reasons to fight beyond fear and habit. The council worked through the night, refining plans and addressing contingencies. By dawn, they had a comprehensive defensive strategy and a clear chain of command. They'd done everything preparation could do. The rest was up to courage and luck. The days before the election blurred together in a haze of final preparations. Families began arriving, setting up camps around the mission. Some came to vote, others came to help defend. A few came just to witness history, one way or another. Marcus Vance, still imprisoned, watched the activity from his cell window. Clara visited him the day before the election, a conversation she'd been putting off. "You're going to fail," Marcus said without preamble. "This whole democratic fantasy will collapse the moment real pressure is applied." "The real pressure is already being applied," Clara replied, "and we're holding. For now. But wait until the fighting starts. Wait until people die for abstract principles instead of concrete power. See how long your coalition lasts then." "You really believe that, don't you? That power is all that matters, that people only cooperate out of fear or self-interest." "I believe in reality, and the reality is that strength wins, always has, always will." Clara studied her brother, this man she'd once looked up to, who'd become something she barely recognized. "You're wrong, Marcus. Not about strength mattering. You're right that the world respects power. But you're wrong about where power comes from. You think it comes from fear and violence. But real power, lasting power, comes from people choosing to give it to you, choosing to follow you because they believe in what you represent." Naive. "We'll see." Clara turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Tomorrow, when the election happens, you're going to have a choice too. We're offering you the same amnesty we offered everyone else. Acknowledge your crimes, accept the council's authority, and you can live out your days in peace, if not freedom. And if I refuse, then you'll be tried for your crimes, and whatever the council decides will be your fate. They'll want me dead. Some will. Others will want mercy. That's the beauty of shared governance. No one person decides. Everyone has a say." Marcus laughed bitterly. "You're offering me the chance to be judged by people I ruled for decades, people I hurt and humiliated. And you think there's a chance they'll show mercy? I think there's a chance they'll show justice, which is more than you ever showed them." That night, Caleb found Ayla standing alone on the mission wall, looking out at the camps spread across the valley. Fires dotted the darkness like fallen stars. "Nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted. "Not of the fighting. I've accepted that's coming. But of failing. Of all these people who believed in us dying for a dream that wasn't strong enough to survive reality. It's strong enough. We're strong enough. How do you know? Because we're still here. Because despite everything, the attacks, the fear, the doubts, people keep choosing to stand with us. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen." She leaned into him. "I keep thinking about my mother, about how she stood up to my father once, early in their marriage, told him he was becoming cruel, that he needed to change. And he broke her. Systematically, over years, until there was nothing left of the woman she'd been. You're not your mother. How do you know? How do you know I won't break too when the real pressure comes? Because you already didn't. You were beaten, chained, left to die. And you came out of it harder, not weaker. Angrier, not defeated. That's not someone who breaks. Maybe I'm just better at hiding it." Caleb turned her to face him. "Listen to me. Tomorrow is going to be hard. People are probably going to die. The loyalists will do everything they can to break us, but they won't succeed. You want to know why? Why? Because you're not fighting for power. You're fighting for choice, for freedom, for the right of people to decide their own fate. And that's a cause people will die for, will kill for, will endure anything for. That's a lot of weight to put on abstract principles. Those principles are the only things that ever mattered. Everything else, the land, the wealth, the status, it's all just dust. But the right to choose your own path, that's worth everything." They stood together in silence, watching the fires burn and the stars wheel overhead. Tomorrow would bring violence and chaos and all the brutal reality of human conflict. But tonight, they had this moment of peace before the storm. Dawn broke clear and cold, the kind of morning that promised heat later but started with a chill that worked into your bones. People emerged from tents and bedrolls, moving through morning routines with nervous energy. Today was the day. Everything they'd worked for, everything they'd risked, came down to this. The voting would begin at noon, conducted in the mission chapel under the watchful eyes of representatives from every major family. The ballots were simple, each family selecting one representative for the permanent council. 5 seats to be filled, with Clara having already announced she wouldn't seek one. She'd done what she needed to do. Now it was time for new voices. Caleb checked defensive positions one final time as the sun climbed higher. Every approach was covered. Every fighter knew their role. They'd done everything preparation could do. Thomas approached as Caleb finished his inspection. Scouts just reported in. Large group moving from the north. At least 50 riders, maybe more. They'll be here within the hour. Right on schedule, then. You almost sound happy about it. I'd rather know when the fight's coming than wonder. At least this way we're ready. The warning spread quickly. Non-combatants moved into the chapel. Fighters took positions. The families who'd come to vote found themselves witnesses to something larger than an election, a battle for the soul of the territory. The Loyalist force appeared on the northern ridge right at midday, a dark line against the bright sky. They paused there, letting their numbers sink in. Caleb counted, 60 riders at least, maybe more. They'd recruited since the last estimate. A single rider broke from their line, approaching under a white flag. It was Vincent Carver, his shoulder healed from the wound he'd taken at Sarah's ranch. Clara went out to meet him, with Ayla and Caleb flanking her. They met in the open ground between the mission and the Loyalist line. Last chance, Vincent said without preamble. Abandon this election, restore the traditional order, acknowledge that Marcus was right and this democratic experiment was wrong. Do that, and we'll let you live. No, Clara said simply. Then everyone who dies today is on your conscience. No, Ayla spoke up. Everyone who dies today chose to die for something they believed in. That's on their own conscience, not ours. Vincent's eyes hardened. You could have been something, Ayla. You were born to power, born to rule. Instead, you're throwing it away for peasants who'll never appreciate what you sacrificed. I didn't sacrifice anything. I gained my freedom. And now I'm helping others gain theirs. Freedom, Vincent spat the word like a curse. There's no such thing. There's only the strong and the weak, the rulers and the ruled, and you've chosen to be weak. Then we'll be weak together, Caleb said. Seems to be working out all right so far. Vincent looked at him with undisguised contempt. You're the rancher, the nobody who started all this. You should have minded your own business. I did mind my business. My business was not leaving someone to die when I could help them. Turns out that's a good business to be in. You'll regret it. Before this day ends, you'll wish you'd never cut those chains. I doubt that. Vincent wheeled his horse around and rode back to his lines. Clara, Ayla, and Caleb returned to the mission, knowing what was coming. The attack began with arrows, fire arrows aimed at the mission buildings, trying to smoke out defenders or create chaos. But the buildings were stone, and the defenders had water ready. The arrows were more show than threat. Then came the charge, 60 riders thundering toward the mission from multiple directions, trying to overwhelm defensive positions through sheer force. They met disciplined rifle fire from prepared positions. The first wave faltered, riders falling or turning back under the withering accuracy. Thomas's fighters had trained for this, had practiced these exact scenarios. They didn't panic. They didn't break. They just kept firing. The Loyalists regrouped and tried again, this time dismounting and advancing on foot, using cover where they could find it. They were brave. Caleb had to give them that. Foolish, but brave. The fighting devolved into a brutal close-quarters battle as some Loyalists made it to the mission walls. Caleb found himself in hand-to-hand combat more than once, using his rifle as a club when there wasn't time to reload. Beside him, Ayla fought with a cold efficiency that spoke to training he hadn't known she'd had. She moved like someone who'd been preparing for this her whole life, every motion precise and economical. The tide of battle shifted back and forth. For every Loyalist who fell, another pressed forward. For every defender who went down wounded, another stepped up to fill the gap. It was brutal. It was chaotic. It was everything war always was, noise and blood and terror and desperate courage all mixed together. And then, impossibly, the Loyalists broke. Not all at once, but in small groups, realizing that their assault had failed, that the defenders weren't routing, that every yard they gained cost them men they couldn't afford to lose. Vincent rallied them one more time, screaming about duty and honor and the natural order. A dozen followed him in a final desperate charge at the main gate. They didn't make it. Concentrated fire cut them down, Vincent falling last, still screaming defiance even as the life left him. The remaining loyalists fled, leaving their dead and wounded behind. The battle was over. In the sudden silence, Caleb realized he was shaking, not from fear, that would come later, in the dark hours when adrenaline faded, but from the sheer effort of staying alive when everything around him wanted him dead. "Casualties," Clara called out, her voice hoarse from shouting orders. "Report." The grim accounting began. 5 defenders dead, 14 wounded, 3 seriously. Among the loyalists, 23 dead, including Vincent, 8 wounded. The rest scattered to the winds. Ayla moved among the wounded, helping where she could, offering water and comfort. Her hands were steady, but Caleb could see the toll in her eyes. This was the cost of their victory. Real people dead, real families destroyed, all for a principle that suddenly felt very abstract in the face of so much suffering. But then something unexpected happened. As the wounded were being tended, as the dead were being laid out with respect, someone from the chapel emerged carrying a ballot box. "The vote," an elderly man called out. "We still need to hold the vote." Clara looked at him like he was insane. "We just fought a battle. People are dead. The vote can wait." "No," the old man insisted. "It can't. Because if we don't vote today, if we let violence stop us, then they win. They prove that democracy only works until someone punches you in the face. We vote now. We prove they failed." A murmur of agreement rose from the crowd. People began emerging from the chapel, moving toward the makeshift voting area with determination that defied exhaustion and fear. Caleb watched in amazement as, surrounded by the evidence of recent violence, families began casting their ballots. Some had tears in their eyes. Some had hands that shook. But they voted. Every eligible person, every family, choosing their leaders not through violence or inheritance, but through simple democratic choice. It took 3 hours. 3 hours of people standing in line, marking ballots, placing them in the box. 3 hours of proving that governance could come from the people rather than being imposed upon them. When the last vote was cast, when the ballots were counted and verified, 5 new council members were announced. Sarah Chen won 1 seat, David Martinez another, Rachel Moss 3rd. 2 other names Caleb barely knew, representatives of smaller families who'd proven their commitment through actions rather than words. As the results were announced, Caleb looked at Ayla. She was crying, tears cutting clean tracks through the dirt and smoke on her face. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." "You did it," he corrected. "You stood up when it mattered. You gave people something to believe in." "We all did it. Every person who voted, every person who fought, every person who chose principle over convenience." She looked around at the exhausted, bloodied, victorious crowd. This is what democracy looks like. Not pretty, not clean, but real. The celebration that night was muted, respectful of the dead but acknowledging the achievement. They'd held an election under fire, literally, and the will of the people had prevailed. The new council was sworn in by firelight, making oaths to serve the people rather than rule them. Marcus was brought out to witness it, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. When Clara offered him the amnesty again, in front of everyone, he shocked them all by accepting. "I was wrong," he said, his voice barely audible. "I thought strength was control, that power was making others fear you, but watching you hold that election while my followers tried to kill you," he shook his head. "That's a kind of strength I never understood, a kind I'm not capable of, but I can acknowledge it. I can accept that my way failed." "That's all we ask," the new council replied. "Acknowledgement, acceptance, and a commitment to support the new way, even if you don't fully understand it." "I'll try." It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't reconciliation, but it was a start. As the fires burned low and people began seeking rest after the longest day any of them had ever lived, Ayla and Caleb found themselves back on the mission wall, their customary place for processing the impossible. "What happens now?" Caleb asked. "Now we govern. We solve problems. We deal with drought and disease and all the normal things that need handling. We proved this wasn't just a moment, but a movement. Sounds exhausting. It will be, but it'll also be worth it. She looked at him. I need to tell you something. All right. The council wants me to stay, help with the transition, be a voice for the next generation, and I'm going to do it. Not because I want power, but because I need to see this through. Need to make sure what we built lasts beyond the initial excitement. That makes sense. But Caleb, I can't ask you to stay for that. You didn't sign up for politics and governance. You signed up to help one woman escape chains. You've done that and so much more. If you want to leave, to find new land and build the quiet life you wanted, I understand. Caleb was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the cabin he'd lost, the isolation he'd sought, the peace he'd thought he wanted. 7 years, he finally said. I spent 7 years alone thinking that was what I needed, thinking peace meant absence of conflict. But these past weeks, I've learned something. Peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's having something worth fighting for, someone worth standing beside. Caleb, I'm staying. Not because you need me to, not because the council wants me to, but because for the first time in a very long time, I'm part of something larger than myself. And I'm not ready to give that up. She kissed him then, fierce and grateful and full of promise for futures they'd build together. Below them, the mission slowly settled into sleep. Guards kept watch. Wounded rested. The dead waited for burial. And somewhere in the night, the scattered remnants of the loyalist force were making their own choices about what came next. But here, on this wall, two people who'd met by chance and been forged by fire stood together, looking toward a morning that promised not perfection, but possibility. Not ease, but purpose. Not the end of their story, but the beginning of everything that mattered. The morning after the election dawned with a silence that felt almost sacred. The mission grounds, which had been a battlefield just hours before, now lay quiet, except for the soft sounds of people beginning to stir. Caleb woke on the wall where he and Ayla had finally dozed off in the pre-dawn hours, her head still resting against his shoulder. Below them, the work of aftermath had already begun. Bodies were being prepared for burial, both defender and loyalist, because the new council had insisted that even their enemies deserved dignity in death. The wounded were being tended in the chapel, which had transformed from voting station to hospital overnight, and people were gathering in small clusters, talking in hushed voices about what they'd witnessed and what it meant. Ayla stirred, opening her eyes slowly. For a moment, confusion crossed her face, then memory returned, and with it a weariness that went bone deep. "Did we really do it?" she asked. "Or did I dream the whole thing?" "We did it. The council's elected. The loyalists are scattered. Marcus surrendered." Caleb helped her sit up. "Now comes the hard part." "What's harder than yesterday?" "Making it mean something. Making it last." They climbed down from the wall to find Clara already in motion, organizing burial details and coordinating with the new council members. She looked like she hadn't slept at all, which was probably true. "There you are," she said when she spotted them. "The council wants to meet in an hour. We need to address immediate concerns before they become crises." "What kind of concerns?" Ayla asked. "The usual, food distribution, medical supplies. What to do with the captured loyalists. How to reach out to the families who didn't come to vote. And," she paused, "what to do about you." "Me?" "You're Marcus Vance's daughter. You're a symbol of the rebellion. People look to you for leadership, but you're not on the council. The new members are worried about the optics. Some think you should have a formal role. Others think that concentrates too much Vance family influence." Ayla rubbed her face. "I told you I didn't want power." "I know, but want and need aren't always aligned. Come to the meeting, hear what they have to say, then decide." The council meeting convened in what had been Marcus's personal office in the mission's administrative building. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone, the new order literally occupying the space where the old order had made its decisions. Sarah Chen, looking exhausted but determined, called the meeting to order. "First order of business, the dead. We've counted 18 of ours, 27 of theirs. We need to decide on burial arrangements." "We bury them together," Rachel Moss said immediately. "In the same ground, with the same respect. We don't create separate graveyards for winners and losers." "Some families won't like that," David Martinez warned. They'll want their dead honored separately from the people who killed them. Then we explain that this is what the new way looks like, Rachel replied. We don't perpetuate the divisions that led to this violence. We acknowledge that everyone who died was someone's son or daughter, someone's friend. The cause they fought for doesn't change that basic humanity. After some debate, the vote was unanimous. The dead would be buried together in a new cemetery on the hill overlooking the mission, with individual markers but a shared memorial recognizing that they'd all died in service of something they believed in, whether the council agreed with those beliefs or not. The next issue was thornier: what to do with the 8 captured loyalists who'd survived the battle. We try them, one council member suggested. Public trials. Let the people decide their fate. That sounds like vengeance disguised as justice, Thomas countered. We're too close to this. Too angry. We need time before we can be fair. Time to do what? Sarah asked. Let them sit in cells indefinitely? That's not justice either. Ayla, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. What if we give them a choice, same as we gave everyone else? Acknowledge what they did. Accept the council's authority. Work to repair the damage they caused. In exchange, they get to live as free citizens under probation. And if they refuse? Then they face trial. But we at least offer the option of redemption. Otherwise, we're just perpetuating the cycle. Punishment breeding resentment, breeding more violence. The debate continued for another hour before the council agreed to Ayla's proposal. The prisoners would be offered terms. Their choice would determine their fate. Then came the question Clara had warned about. David Martinez cleared his throat. We need to address the elephant in the room. Ayla Vance. The council believes she should have an official role in the new government, but we're divided on what that role should be. I don't want a seat on the council, Ayla said immediately. I meant what I said about not concentrating Vance family power. We're not offering you a council seat, Sarah said. We're offering you something different, an advisory position, someone who can speak for the next generation, who can help us transition from the old ways to the new, who can remind us why we did this when the work gets hard and the results seem slow. That sounds like a fancy title for doing what I'm already doing. Exactly. We're just making it official, giving you authority to speak without giving you power to command. You'd have voice but no vote, influence but no control. Ayla looked at Caleb, who'd been standing quietly in the corner. He gave a slight shrug that said the choice was hers. Can I think about it? Of course. But we'd like an answer within the week. We're announcing the new government structure in 10 days, and we want to know what to tell people. The meeting continued through the afternoon, addressing dozens of practical concerns that came with building governance from scratch. Water rights, land disputes, trade agreements, the mundane details that actually made society function. Caleb found himself drifting, his attention caught by the view through the window. People were working together to repair damage from the battle, to prepare for the burials, to start rebuilding what violence had torn down. It wasn't dramatic or exciting, but it was real. It was the actual work of peace. After the meeting finally adjourned, Ayla found him outside, watching the preparations for the burial ceremony. What are you thinking? She asked. That we won the battle. Now we get to see if we can win the peace. You sound doubtful. Not doubtful, just realistic. Peace is harder than war. War has clear objectives. Defeat the enemy, survive the day. Peace is just endless small choices to be better than you were yesterday. It's exhausting. Is that why you stayed? To be exhausted for the rest of your life? He smiled. I stayed because being exhausted together beats being peaceful alone. She took his hand. The council's offer, the advisory position. What do you think I should do? What do you want to do? I want to make sure what we built lasts. I want to be there when the hard decisions come and remind people why we fought for the right to make those decisions ourselves. She paused. I want to honor what you did when you cut those chains by making sure no one ever has to be chained again. Then do it. Take the position. Help them build something that lasts. And what will you do? Whatever needs doing. I'm not a politician or a leader, but I can build. I can defend. I can be the person who stands beside you while you change the world. That's all you want? To stand beside me? That's everything I want. The burial ceremony happened 2 days later as the sun reached its zenith. The entire territory seemed to have come, council supporters, former fence-sitters, even a few loyalist family members who wanted to mourn their dead. The new cemetery on the hill held 45 graves, arranged without regard for which side each person had fought on. Rachel Moss, who'd lost her own family to Marcus's cruelty, spoke words that tried to honor the dead without glorifying the violence that killed them. We bury these people not as enemies or allies, but as human beings who made choices. Some of those choices we agree with, some we don't. But each person here was loved by someone, mattered to someone, and that basic truth transcends politics or power. She paused, looking across the assembled crowd. We also bury them as a reminder of the cost of division, of what happens when we stop seeing each other as people and start seeing each other as obstacles. If their deaths mean anything, let them mean we choose a different path forward. Marcus attended the ceremony, escorted by guards but no longer in chains. He stood apart from the crowd, his face unreadable as Vincent Carver, the young man who'd led the final charge, was lowered into the ground. After the ceremony, as people began dispersing back to their homes and lives, Marcus approached Ayla. The guards tensed, but Clara waved them back. "I need to say something," Marcus began, his voice rough with emotion he was barely controlling. "And I need you to hear it." Ayla waited, giving him nothing. "I was wrong, not just about the council or democracy or any of the political things. I was wrong about you. I thought beating you would break you, would make you understand that resistance was futile, would show you that I was right about the world. Instead, you created exactly what you feared," Ayla said quietly, "someone who would stop at nothing to prove you wrong." "Yes, and he struggled with the word. "I'm sorry, not for getting caught, not for losing, but for what I did to you. For forgetting you were my daughter before you were a political asset, for choosing power over family." Ayla studied her father, this man who'd ordered her beaten and chained, who'd nearly killed her, who'd ruled through fear for decades. She saw the regret in his eyes, but also the understanding that regret didn't erase harm. "I accept your apology," she said finally. "Not because it changes anything, not because it makes what you did okay, but because holding on to hatred would make me like you. And I've spent too much effort becoming something different to throw that away now. What happens to me now? That's up to the council. You accepted amnesty, you acknowledged your crimes, so you'll live, but under restrictions. Supervision, regular check-ins to ensure you're not plotting a return to power. It's not freedom, but it's life. That's more than you offered me." Marcus nodded slowly. "And you? What will you do?" "I'm going to help build the world I wanted to live in, the one where daughters aren't property, where power comes from people, not from fear, where choice matters more than tradition. That's a hard world to build. I know, but I'd rather fail at building something good than succeed at maintaining something evil." For the first time in her memory, Ayla saw something like pride in her father's eyes. It was complicated pride, mixed with shame and regret, but it was there. "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for," Marcus said. "Stronger than I ever was." "I had to be. You made sure of that." He had no answer to that. After a moment, he walked away, escorted back to the supervised housing where he'd live out whatever remained of his life. Clara appeared at Ayla's side. "That was gracious of you, more than he deserved." "Probably. But we're trying to build something better than what came before. That means being better than our worst impulses, even when it's hard." "Speaking of building something better, have you decided about the advisory position?" Ayla looked across the cemetery, at the people slowly making their way down the hill, at the mission in the distance, at the territory spreading out in all directions. "I'll do it, on one condition." "What's that?" "That the position has term limits. I'll serve for 2 years, help with the transition, then step aside for someone else. We're building a system that doesn't depend on any one person. I need to model that, not contradict it." Clara smiled. "The council will agree to that, gladly." The next week blurred with activity as the new government began actually governing. Disputes were mediated, resources were redistributed, plans were made for infrastructure improvements that had been neglected under Marcus's rule. It was boring work, tedious work, but it was the actual substance of making society function. Caleb found himself drafted into various projects, helping rebuild Sarah's ranch buildings, improving the mission's defensive positions in case of future threats, even teaching some of the younger people skills he'd learned in the war. Not the violence, but the practical things. How to set up supply lines, how to organize watches, how to maintain equipment. One afternoon, about 10 days after the election, he was helping repair a barn when a rider approached. It was one of the scouts who'd been keeping watch on the canyon country where the remaining loyalists had fled. "We've found something," the scout reported to Thomas, who'd come to inspect the repair work. "You need to see it." Thomas, Caleb, and Ayla rode out that evening to where the scout led them. In a small valley at the edge of the canyon country, they found a camp, but not a military one. It was a settlement. Rough shelters, but organized. Gardens being planted. Children playing. The remaining loyalists, it turned out, had given up on fighting. They'd simply left, created their own community away from the council's authority, seeking to preserve the old ways in isolation rather than through violence. "Should we bring them back?" Thomas asked. "They're technically in council territory." Ayla shook her head. "Let them be. As long as they're not attacking anyone, they have the right to live how they choose. That's what this whole thing was about, choice. We can't force our way on them any more than Marcus should have forced his way on us. What if they grow strong enough to threaten us again? Then we deal with it then. But right now, they're not a threat. They're just people who want to be left alone. I understand that impulse better than most." They rode back to the mission as the sun set, painting the sky in violent reds and purples that seemed at odds with the peace they were trying to build. "Do you think it'll work?" Caleb asked Ayla as they rode. "This whole democratic experiment?" "I don't know. History isn't encouraging about these things lasting. But I know it's worth trying. And I know every day it survives is a day more people get to make their own choices about their own lives. That's something. That's everything." The official inauguration of the Permanent Council happened 2 weeks after the election, timed to coincide with the new moon, a symbol of new beginnings in a territory that desperately needed one. The ceremony was simple by design, no pomp, no circumstance, just the 5 elected council members standing before the assembled families and swearing oaths not to power, but to service. Swearing to remember they served at the pleasure of the people, not the other way around. Ayla's role as advisor was announced to general approval, with the term limits she'd insisted on written into the founding documents. She stood beside the council, but not on it, symbolically representing voice without control. After the official business concluded, the gathering transformed into something more celebratory. Food was shared, music played, stories were told about the past weeks, some heroic, some humorous, all part of the mythology being built around the territory's transformation. Caleb found himself telling the story of finding Ayla chained to his fence, though he tried to downplay his own role. Others weren't having it. "You started all this," Sarah Chen insisted. "One choice, one moment of mercy. That's all it took to change everything. It wasn't just me. It was everyone who chose to stand up after that. But someone had to go first. Someone had to show it was possible." Later, as the party wound down and people began seeking rest, Caleb and Ayla walked away from the mission, out into the scrubland under a sky full of stars. "In all the chaos, I never asked," Ayla said. "Are you happy with how things turned out?" Caleb considered the question seriously. "I lost my cabin. I lost my peace. I lost the quiet life I thought I wanted. So by most measures, I should be miserable. But I gained something I didn't know I was missing. Purpose, connection. You. So yes, I'm happy. Probably happier than I've been since before the war. Even though everything's complicated and messy and uncertain, especially because of that, the quiet life was just another kind of death. Slow and comfortable, but still death. This," he gestured back toward the mission, toward the people building something new. "This is life. Real, messy, complicated life." Ayla stopped walking and turned to face him. "I need to tell you something." "All right. I've been offered my father's estate. Clara says it's mine by right, and the council agrees. 10,000 acres. The big house. Everything I was supposed to inherit. Are you going to take it?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to. Wants to prove I can take what was his and make it something better. But another part just wants to walk away. Let someone else have it. Start fresh." "What does your gut tell you?" She was quiet for a long moment. "That I don't need it. That claiming it would be claiming a legacy I've spent the past month trying to escape, that the person I'm becoming doesn't need 10,000 acres to prove her worth. Then don't take it. The council says we should use it, turn it into something for everyone, a school maybe, or a hospital, something that serves the people instead of just one family. That sounds like a good middle ground. It does, doesn't it? She smiled. I'd still have to be involved in planning it, overseeing the transition, making sure it actually serves its purpose. Is that what you want to do? She stopped, gathering her thoughts. I want to build something with you. Not a dynasty or an empire, just a life. Maybe on a piece of land somewhere. Maybe doing work that matters. Maybe with people we care about nearby, but not on top of us. That sounds perfect. Even though it's not the quiet isolation you came here for? I came here running from ghosts. I found something worth living for instead. That's better than anything I was running toward. They stood there in the darkness, two people who'd met by chance and been forged by fire into something neither of them had expected. Caleb, in all of this, we never talked about what comes after the transition period, after my advisory term ends, after the council is stable and doesn't need us watching over it every moment. What do you want to come after? I want to find a piece of land, not as big as my father's estate, just enough for horses and maybe some cattle. I want to build a house with my own hands. I want to watch sunsets that aren't colored by political intrigue. And I want... She paused, vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed herself to be. I want to do all of that with you, if you want that too. I want that more than anything. Even though I come with complications, a famous name, a history that will follow us wherever we go, even though. Because those complications are part of who you are, and who you are is exactly who I want to build a life with. She kissed him then, and it felt like a promise, not of perfection or ease, but of partnership, of facing whatever came next together. They returned to the mission to find a commotion. Clara was arguing with someone Caleb didn't recognize, a well-dressed man on an expensive horse, accompanied by armed guards. "What's going on?" Ayla asked. Clara turned, relief on her face. "This is Robert Caldwell. He represents the territorial governor. Apparently word of our little revolution has reached the capital." "I wouldn't call it a revolution," Caldwell said smoothly. "More of a transition in local governance, which, I'm here to inform you, is illegal without gubernatorial approval." "Illegal?" Sarachin stepped forward. "We overthrew a tyrant, held free elections, established democratic governance. How is that illegal?" "Because this territory is under the governor's authority. All changes in governance must be approved by the capital." "You've effectively declared independence without permission." "We didn't declare anything," Ayla said. "We just stopped letting one man dictate how we lived. That's not independence, that's basic human dignity." Caldwell studied her. "You must be Ayla Vance. I've heard quite a bit about you, the daughter who defied her father and started a rebellion." "I didn't start anything. I just refused to die quietly." "Semantics. Regardless, I'm here to inform you that the governor is prepared to recognize your new council, with conditions." "What conditions?" Clara demanded. "First, the council must acknowledge territorial authority. Second, it must pay taxes to the territorial government. Third, it must enforce territorial law, not just local ordinances. And fourth," he looked directly at Ayla, "the governor wants assurances that this democratic experiment won't spread to other regions, that you'll contain your ideals to this territory." The council members looked at each other, having a silent conversation that excluded Caldwell entirely. Finally, David Martinez spoke. "We'll agree to the first three conditions. We never sought independence from the territory. We just sought freedom from tyranny. But the fourth condition, we can't control what other people choose to do. If our example inspires others, that's their choice, not ours." "That's not acceptable." "Then we have a problem," Clara said flatly. "Because we're not going to lie. We're not going to pretend we don't believe democracy is better than tyranny. We're not going to help the governor suppress other people's freedom just to protect our own." Caldwell's guards shifted, hands moving toward weapons. The tension ratcheted up instantly. "I'd advise against that," Thomas said quietly, appearing with a dozen armed defenders. "We just fought a war for our right to self-governance. We're prepared to fight another one if necessary." Caldwell raised his hands, signaling his guards to stand down. There's no need for violence. I'll convey your response to the governor. But I should warn you, defiance has consequences. So does tyranny, Ayla replied. We've already paid that price. We're not afraid to pay it again. Caldwell and his escort left, making vague threats about sanctions and repercussions. After they were gone, the council gathered to discuss the implications. We might have just made an enemy of the territorial government, Rachel worried. We already had that enemy, Clara countered. Any government that requires us to suppress democratic ideals isn't a government worth serving. But we can't fight the entire territory. We don't have to fight anyone, Ayla said. We just have to keep doing what we're doing, proving that our way works. If the governor tries to stop us, he'll be the one attacking democracy, not defending order. That's a terrible look politically. You're assuming the governor cares about optics. All politicians care about optics. It's how they maintain power. If we make ourselves sympathetic, victims of governmental overreach, we gain allies across the territory. Other communities who see in us the possibility of their own freedom. The debate continued, but the consensus was clear. They'd come too far to surrender now. They'd face whatever the territorial governor threw at them, together. Over the next 3 months, a strange equilibrium emerged. The territorial government imposed sanctions, limiting trade, restricting access to certain resources. But it stopped short of military action, apparently unwilling to be seen crushing a democratic movement. Meanwhile, the council proved it could govern. Disputes were resolved fairly, infrastructure improved. The territory's productivity actually increased as resources were distributed more equitably, and people worked for their own benefit rather than Marcus's. And word spread. Other territories heard about the free election, about the overthrown tyrant, about the possibility of self-governance. Delegations started arriving, asking questions, learning how it had been done. The governor's fourth condition, containing the democratic experiment, was proving impossible. Not because the council was spreading propaganda, but because they were simply living the truth. And truth, once released, was hard to contain. Caleb and Ayla spent those months working on their own future. They found land, a beautiful valley about 20 miles from the mission, far enough for privacy but close enough to help when needed. They began building a house, working alongside hired hands and volunteers who came to help the territory's most famous couple. It wasn't the cabin Caleb had lost. It was better. Larger, sturdier, built with the knowledge of lessons learned. And it was theirs, built together rather than alone. 6 months after the election, Ayla's advisory term entered its second half. She'd done what she'd set out to do, helped stabilize the transition, reminded people why they'd fought when the work got tedious, served as a bridge between the old ways and the new. Now it was time to think about succession, about who would take her place when her term ended, about ensuring the system didn't depend on her any more than it had depended on Marcus. She convened a gathering of young people from across the territory, the next generation who would inherit what was being built. She spoke to them about responsibility and choice, about the cost of freedom and the price of complacency. What you're inheriting isn't perfect, she told them. It's messy and complicated and will require constant work to maintain, but it's yours. You'll have voices in how it develops, power to shape it, and responsibility to preserve it for those who come after you. One young woman raised her hand. How do we know it'll last? How do we know we won't just end up with another Marcus in 20 years? You don't, Ayla replied honestly. There are no guarantees. Democracy isn't a destination. It's a choice you make every single day. The choice to participate, to care, to hold leaders accountable, to stand up when you see injustice. You stop making those choices, you'll get exactly what you deserve. That's a lot of pressure. It is, but it's better than the alternative, having no choices at all, having your life dictated by someone who doesn't care about your interests. I know both systems. I'll take the pressure of choice over the comfort of subjugation any day. The gathering energized Ayla, reminded her why all the struggle had been worthwhile. This generation wouldn't have to fight the battles she'd fought. They'd have different battles, different challenges, but they'd face them with tools she'd never had: voice, choice, agency. As her term approached its end, Ayla announced she wouldn't seek renewal or any other position in the government. She was stepping away completely, trusting the system to continue without her. The announcement sparked concern among some council members, but Clara understood. You've given everything you can give, Clara said during their final private meeting. Now it's time to live for yourself. Build the life you chose instead of the one that was forced on you. Will it hold? Ayla asked. Everything we built, will it survive without constant vigilance? Nothing survives without vigilance, but you've taught enough people to be vigilant. You've modeled what leadership in service of others looks like. They'll carry that forward. And if they don't, then they'll suffer the consequences and hopefully learn and rebuild. That's how this works. Success and failure, learning and adapting, constant improvement toward ideals we never quite reach, but never stop pursuing. On her last day in office, Ayla stood before the council one final time. I came into this role reluctantly, she said. I didn't want power, didn't want responsibility. I just wanted to be free. But I learned something over these months. Real freedom isn't isolation. It's not the absence of responsibility. Real freedom is the ability to choose your responsibilities, to decide what you'll fight for and who you'll stand beside. She looked around the room at faces that had become familiar, at people who'd become friends. I chose to fight for this, for all of you, for the right of people to govern themselves, for the possibility that power could come from consent rather than fear. And we won. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to give the next generation a fighting chance, enough to prove it's possible. She paused, emotion threatening to overwhelm her words. Now I'm choosing something else. I'm choosing to build a life with the man who freed me from chains. I'm choosing to raise horses and watch sunsets and let someone else carry this burden for a while. And that choice, the ability to make it freely without asking permission, that's what all of this was for. The council rose and applauded, not because she was leaving, but because she'd given them the tools to continue without her. Caleb was waiting outside when she emerged. How do you feel? Lighter, scared, free. All of it at once. Good. Because our house is finished, and I think it's time we actually lived in it. They rode to the valley that evening, to the house they'd built together. It wasn't grand or impressive. It was just a good, solid structure designed for living rather than impressing. Inside, they found gifts from people across the territory. Furniture, supplies, a beautiful quilt made by Sarah Chen, a gun rack from Thomas with a note reading, "Just in case." Books from Clara's library with a message about building minds as well as houses. They spent their first night in their new home talking about the future. Not the territory's future, they'd given enough to that, but their own future. The life they'd build. The choices they'd make. Do you have regrets? Caleb asked as they lay in their bed, watching moonlight stream through the window. About what? Giving up the position, the influence, the ability to shape what comes next. Ayla was quiet for a moment. No, because I realized something. My father spent his whole life accumulating power, and it destroyed him, destroyed our family, destroyed countless others. I don't want that life. I want this, a partner I trust, work that matters, freedom to make my own choices. Even if those choices are mundane, fixing fences instead of fixing governments, especially if they're mundane. The world needs people doing the spectacular things, leading revolutions, holding councils accountable, fighting for justice. But it also needs people doing the quiet things, building homes, raising families, living the freedom that others fight for. That's what you want? The quiet life? I want the chosen life. And right now I choose quiet. Maybe in a few years I'll choose something else. That's the beauty of freedom. You get to keep choosing. They fell asleep that night in their own home, on their own land, having made their own choices about how to live. It was a simple ending to a complicated story, but simple, they'd both learned, was often best. The years that followed brought changes, as years always do. The council evolved, sometimes struggling, sometimes thriving, but always continuing. The territorial governor eventually recognized their governance officially, unable to fight the tide of democratic movement spreading across the region. Other territories followed suit, each finding their own path to self-governance. Marcus died 3 years after his surrender, in the supervised housing where he'd spent his final days. He died peacefully, having made some measure of peace with his past, though never fully repairing the damage he'd caused. Ayla attended his funeral, not out of forgiveness, but out of closure. She buried her father and with him the last chains of obligation to the family name. Clara lived to see the democratic system she'd helped build spread across 5 territories. She died in her sleep at 78, surrounded by family and friends, having witnessed the transformation she'd fought for. Thomas became the head of the Territorial Defense Force, training new generations in the art of protecting freedom without becoming tyrants themselves. He never married, claiming he was married to the cause, but he died happy, knowing the world was better than when he'd entered it. Sarah Chen expanded her ranch with the returned water rights, eventually passing it to her daughter, who passed it to hers. The land prospered under their care, a testament to what people could build when given the chance. And Caleb and Ayla built their life in the valley, exactly as they'd planned. They raised horses, as Ayla had wanted. They built a small library of books, as Caleb had dreamed. They occasionally got involved in council business when asked, but mostly they lived for themselves and each other. They had children, 3 of them, who grew up knowing both their grandfather's legacy and their parents' triumph over it. The children learned that power was a tool, not a right, that freedom required constant vigilance, that the best life was the one you chose consciously, every single day. On an evening 20 years after Caleb had found Ayla chained to his fence, they sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the valley. Their children were grown now, making their own choices about their own lives. The territory was stable, prosperous, free. "Do you ever think about that day?" Ayla asked. "When you found me?" "Every day," Caleb replied. "It's the day everything changed." "Do you wish you'd made a different choice? Ridden past? Minded your own business?" He took her hand, weathered now by years of work and life. "Not for a single second. That choice led to this, to you, to everything that matters. How could I regret that? We got lucky. Things could have gone very differently. They always can, but we made our choices and lived with the consequences. That's all anyone can do." They sat in silence as the stars emerged, the same stars that had watched over them through revolution and rebuilding, through violence and peace, through all the complicated years of building a life worth living. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The horses nickered in response. The wind carried the smell of rain coming, of seasons changing, of time moving forward as it always did. And on a porch in a valley far from anywhere important, 2 people who'd found each other in the worst of circumstances sat together in the best of them, having built exactly the life they'd chosen. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better than that. It was real.